The Streets, Traffic, and Refuge Committee will be called to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Murphy. Here. Alderman Kotar.
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd. Here. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Martin.
Here.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Present.
Chairman Boyd.
Present.
Alderman Moore. Alderman Bosley. 6 present. We have quorum.
Thank you. The purpose of the meeting today is to literally talk trash. We want to talk about what's going on in the city of St. Louis with the trash situation. Last year around this time or right before, we increased the fees by $3. One of the reasons to do that was to make sure that we get trucks. The issue then was that we didn't have enough trucks. We had drivers kind of sitting around waiting on other drivers to come in to use their trucks, and basically the trucks are being overused and their usefulness is probably running out a lot faster than it was intended. The other thing we did with increasing the fees was we also were to receive 100 cameras in our alleys, because one of the other issues with trash is illegal dumping. Some wards experience it more than others, but it's still a continued battle that we need to deal with. So today we have before us to testify and talk about trash and what we're doing about it, and update us on the strategy. We have the director who's going to speak, Jamie Wilson. We have also the director of personnel who will speak and kind of update us on the hiring practices and where we are, if there's a bottleneck with that. But also, I understand there are representatives from unions. So if anybody want to speak that's not a city official, feel free to come and sign up. So,
She brought him up.
I don't have it. Okay. So has everybody signed up who wants to speak this morning who's not a public official? Okay. So why don't we go ahead and have Mr. Wilson come up and kind of talk to us about from whence we came and where we are today.
That's a good way to sum it up right there. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Again, my name is Jamie Wilson, Director of Streets. Within the Street Department, we're comprised of the Traffic and Lighting Division, the Street Division, Towing Division, and of course, Refuse Division. With me today, I've got the Refuse Commissioner, Nick Young, and the Deputy Commissioner, Randy Breitenfeld. I will note that Nick Young, today is his last day. He's retiring after 46 years of working with the city, so just want that to be acknowledged. Before we start talking about the refuse issues and some of the solutions, just kind of want to wrap up or say a few facts here to wrap everyone's minds around what kind of animal we're dealing with as far as trash collection in the city. Annually, we collect about 140,000 tons of solid waste, which is, by math, 280 million pounds of trash, traditional trash per year. We have about 20,000 tons of yard waste that's collected as well, and then another 17,000 tons of recycling every year. We've got 55 routes that we complete these collections. 42 of those are in alleys, and 13 of those are in your traditional rollout carts. For our alleys, we collect in the past, historically, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday, 4 10-hour days, and then our carts are a 5-day collection cycle. We've got about 84 trucks in service and about 69 drivers in our TO as far as our capacity to collect. Some of the issues that we've ran into with those 55 routes per day is the ability to have trucks to go with the drivers to complete those routes. So that's, as the chairman referenced, that was our issue in the past, and that's why the fee increase came about. We needed a plan to upgrade our trucks. Our trucks were well over the average lifespan that, or average age that you would like for a fleet. Our fleet is about approximately 10 years old on average. A lot of our trucks are, in fact, 18 years old. They're year 2000 models, which are very difficult to keep on the road. It's difficult to repair old stuff, and it's difficult to keep it on the road once you do repair it with the obvious heavy lifting that we're doing on a daily basis. So thankfully the fee increase came. It'd be a sad state of affairs if we were standing here trying to figure out what to do about that fleet. Thankfully, multiple years of efforts to get that in place. It came to fruition last year. So we had the fee increase, that $3 increase. It allowed us to come up with a plan that will replace our entire fleet when we're done. To date, we've got about 16 new trucks in service as a result of that. We have another 15 coming before the end of the year. So that will greatly infuse our fleet with some youth in it as far as new trucks. So that's a great thing. Those upgrades will continue phased in over the years. We can't buy all 76 in 1 year. It doesn't make sense. So it's a balance of cash and lease purchase mechanisms each year to accomplish that. So we front-loaded this first years to kind of vault us into better collection and timely collection of the services. So that was accomplished through that fee increase. In the interim, so obviously it's a great plan. We're not going to fully realize the impact of that till we get into those later years. This first year, after we get those 15, they'll definitely be after 31 new trucks within about a calendar year of time, spanning 2 fiscal years. But a calendar year's worth of time will greatly increase our ability to collect those services, collect the trash in a timely manner. But anyway, while we're in that interim period, we're not just waiting for the trucks. We're not just waiting for those trucks to come, and then we'll resume operations. We're doing on the manpower side, we're doing everything we can to get creative on how we're collecting. I told you how traditionally we collect trash. We're about to enter our 3rd iteration of revised man hours and with our workforce to, in an interim basis, compensate for the fact that we don't have enough trucks at any one time for the entire staff to go out. We've gone through our first iteration of splitting our shift into 2 within a single day. So at any time there's enough vehicles for our staff. Those are long days, 4 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. It turned our 10-hour routes into 8-hour routes, so it was a little difficult to get those collections, and also was very challenging on our drivers as far as being the early guy or being the late guy as far as affecting their personal lives. Right now we're back to the 4-day collections. What we don't collect on Monday, Tuesday, excuse me, we pick up on Wednesday on the off day. What we don't collect Thursday, Friday, we collect on Saturday and even Sunday if necessary. On August 4th, we're going to enter into, as I referenced, our 3rd iteration of a revised work schedule to make up for the lack of trucks. That will consist of going back to 2 4 10-hour shifts. So our entire crew will be split into 2 shifts. They each respectively will work 4 10-hour days. They will not be the same 4 days, though, so we don't have that truck demand on the same 4 days. We're stretching it apart. They will all have 3 days off, and those will be strategically staggered. So instead of 4 days of max demand on trucks, we'll have 2. The rest of the days will be a fractional demand on our trucks. So again, that will let us 1, have enough trucks for the collections, and 2, provide our equipment services guys enough chance to keep those trucks in the lot to actually work on them instead of waiting for them to get off the street. So that's really from the equipment side. The fee increase allowed us to do that upgrade, and then on the manpower side, describe kind of the three iterations of what we're doing. Again, to sum it up, by the end of this year, when we get those additional 15 trucks, I think you'll see a vast change in it. Are we out of the woods? No, we won't. We want our entire fleet to continue to upgrade and to be able to provide even better service to the residents, but it will be vastly changed after this infusion of new trucks into our fleet. I don't know if we want to questions or if additional.
Yes, we'll grab some questions from the committee. Have you seen the front page of the Post-Dispatch today?
I did a few minutes ago, yes.
I was just wondering, are we picking up trash for Progressive?
I believe that first picture is private hauler. That's not city dumpsters.
Oh, so we got credit for something that we didn't deserve credit for.
It appears so.
Looks like their dumpster is pretty overcrowded. I don't mind taking credit for stuff that we need to own, but if we don't own it, we probably shouldn't get that credit. I would hope the Post-Dispatch would, make a correction on that because that's very misleading.
I would agree as well.
Let's go ahead and take questions from members of the committee. Actually, no, we're going to talk to the personnel director real quick. And then we'll come back to you, Jamie.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So if Mr. Frank would come up. Ms. Frank, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know people have talked about, it's hard to get drivers, it's hard to get mechanics. Tell us what's going on when it comes to hiring drivers and mechanics to help us with our trash issue.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, honorable members of the committee. I also have with me today my senior deputy, Linda Thomas, who's got a lot of years of experience here, and Brian Beckelman, who's my recruitment and examination manager. And there's been a change in the landscape over the last several years. We did have difficulty in finding people with the required CDL licenses. And one of our strategies at that time was to have some of our senior people train new employees in order to get experience on the equipment and qualify for the CDL license, and we would give them a 10% temporary assignment differential. I think Eric here, my friend that is a union person, has done a great job with that in refuse. We've also done it in towing. But the situation's really changed the last couple of years. We've been very aggressive in terms of our outreach, and the latest data shows that we have approximately 39 people who are qualified and on the eligible list ready to be hired. And in addition to those full-time positions, we have per performance people. I've worked with the Director of Operations on this so that these people can supplement our workforce on those days when we have people out because of family medical leave or we have them out because of workers' comp. I will say in terms of workers' comp, I'm pleased. Refuse used to be one of our 2 highest divisions because of soft tissue injuries. We've done a lot of work in terms of Save Your Body, classes on how to do proper lifting, etc. And both our third-party administrator, CCMSI, as well as our capitation manager, have noticed a decrease in terms of the amount of workers' comp claims. That being said, part of the problem that we have is just the number of trucks. So we have people who are ready to be hired, but there aren't trucks for them. So I think the emphasis has shifted from several years ago when we had difficulty getting people into the workforce. Now it's really getting those trucks out there so that we can manage the schedule. So that would be my brief summary of the change in the landscape. We do have a number of people who are lined up ready to come to work, and it's just as soon as we can get the sufficient number of vehicles, we can be fully staffed, which will be a great benefit for our Streets Director and Refuse Commissioner.
Okay. Thank you. Someone may have questions for you, but we're going to go ahead and go through the committee and maybe have questions for Mr. Wilson.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Jamie, would you mind coming back up? We're going to go through the roll. I'm sure somebody has a question for you. We're going to go through the committee first, and then we have other colleagues who are here that I want to extend time for them as well. And if anyone you want to pull a seat up, you're more than welcome to do that. Okay, Alderwoman Murphy.
Thank you, Chairman. And I just a couple of questions. When will the full contingent of trucks be on the road? I know they're not all ever going to all be new, but when will the full contingent be ready?
I think we've scaled out the plan. The budget division through 2028 will be the replacement of 76 trucks, which is approximately our fleet size right now.
Okay. And so then on that line, so then the other trucks will be getting old again. I'm sorry. Do we have enough mechanics on board that can properly work on these trucks, with the hydraulic lifts and all that, to keep them functioning as we go through this?
I think that's equipment services, but I'm sure they would always like more. There's a combination of work that's done through the vendors for warranty work. There's contract work for welding, so there's a lot of different variations of who works on the trucks. But as far as equipment services, their staffing, I'm not aware of how many mechanics are they asking for more or not, but I would believe we're fine.
Okay. And then just one question. I don't know if you can answer this. What happens to our yard waste now? Our yard waste dumpsters, where does that go? It's not recycled. Where does that go?
That's to our dump.
Just to our dump. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So is it necessary to keep separating all that, or do we want to still keep doing that?
I think logistically we're just collecting those, and that's how it's
It just divided up that way? Okay. Thank you. That's all right now.
Alderman Coler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here, Jamie. Jamie, I was trying to take notes while you were giving your remarks, and you were rattling off numbers. Talk to me, how many trucks in total do we have?
84.
84. How many are on the road right now?
Today we have 50.
50. How many we've purchased? I think I did get that number. We've purchased 16 and we've got
16 in hand and 15 by the end of the year.
Okay. Those 16 that we've purchased, now, it's my understanding that some of those are already having problems, is that right?
I think naturally some vehicles do, and that's warranty work, and that's a fairly quick turnaround on getting that type of stuff resolved.
Okay, so are those 16 new trucks on the road, or are several of them down right now?
I'd have to look at the list for with certainty say, but I would say a vast majority of those are on the street, yes.
Okay, and when we get these 15 new ones, is the manufacturer, I mean, I'm assuming they'll be under warranty, but is the manufacturer going to correct these issues in advance? So we
Absolutely.
don't take a delivery and then immediately have to send them to the shop?
Yes, there are instances where they note something as far as performance, and we could predict it's going to happen on the same, in the same manner for the other vehicles, and that's being replaced on a proactive way.
Okay, thanks. All right, so on the routes, I guess on a more basic level, you know, I'm getting, like everybody else up here, a lot of complaints about trash service in certain neighborhoods, but not others. And so I guess I'm kind of wondering why, you know, Soulard, for example, I'm experiencing huge issues with trash pickup, and then across Gravois and McKinley Heights, I have next to no complaints, and service seems fine over there. What is it about these routes that causes these discrepancies?
I don't as much see the consistency of missing a route that I've heard from some. It's really a product of how many vehicles we have. I mean, yesterday we may have 45 vehicles. Today we have 50, so there's a difference right there as far as who gets coverage, and the guys have to wait till the truck comes out. That route all of a sudden isn't covered for a day, has to be picked up on, you know, if it's a Monday route, maybe it's picked up on Wednesday. So it's kind of a moving target. I'm afraid there's not a single answer. So one day's answer is not the other day's answer. But again, I don't see the consistency. One route is better service than the other. I'd be willing to look at why that is if that's the case, though. It
Okay.
hasn't come to my attention that one route is consistently missed historically while another is serviced.
Thanks, Jamie. And
Sure.
I guess my next question, and I think you touched on this last night, I couldn't make the meeting last night, and this is not just an issue regarding the refuse division or the streets in general, but really, I think, across all city departments. But these CSB requests, you know, we try to encourage citizens to file, you know, when there's issues, whether it's trash service or lighting or anything else. I don't mean to put you on the spot to answer for CSB, but I want to just talk about the refuse part in general. You know, we ask people to file these requests so we can track and hold everybody accountable, yet more often than not, I wind up getting emails from constituents saying, I put in a Citizen Service Bureau request for X, Y, or Z, here's the complaint number, it's closed and nothing's happened, it's still the same. Now, and again, this is not just a criticism of refuse, this is across the board with all departments. Could you walk us through, I guess, at least for your department, what happens when a citizen, either via Twitter or online, puts forth that CSP request? How long does it take to get to your departments, and then what happens from there?
The way CSB works for us and for all the departments in the city, it is a process. It is a mechanical process. It's documented. So Joe Citizen doesn't have to know exactly which department, which division, and which office of a division,
Right.
as you whittle down to
Even I
who
have
exactly
trouble
does
knowing
it.
that.
So, I mean, I will honestly say between different departments and divisions, there still is uncertainty as far as who exactly within that division covers it. You really don't know unless you're in that division, honestly. But anyway, the beauty of CSB is that the people that do there's X amount of problem codes, as they call it, identified in CSB. So if it's debris in the alley, it's a street light out, it's whatever it is, those are all tagged, hard-coded to a particular person and division to address.
But so who tags that? Is that the CSB?
CSB works with all the different departments to identify those problem codes, whether it's a single street light out, a whole block out, debris in the alley, that type of stuff, pothole, and we give them the name and contact information for who goes with that. And that's true for street department, it's true for Parks and Rec. Everybody puts in their people, their contact people. So when the citizen hits it, whether it's a phone call or it's online, and they point out the problem that they have a street light out, it goes from there. It goes right to the person, so there's no who handles this. So it is automatically sent to the person in charge of it, and they dispatch it to their crews to address it. And then once they address it, if I receive, I check my City Works and go see what the CSBs are for streetlights out. I will see my list of what's been put in yesterday or last night. I will dispatch those to the crews, and they'll go start investigating that in the field. They'll come up with a resolution, and so I told you we have problem codes. There's also resolution, public resolution codes, work completed, no problem found, it's an amortization, whatever the answers are already predetermined, and the workforce is able to, or the foreman is able to pick a particular problem code that addresses it. So if it's a whole block out for streetlights, for example, and our guys find it was a problem at the substation and it's fixed, they'll say work completed, and you'll see the lights back on. If it's something else, if maybe it's a traffic signal and it's dark, it's not something we could fix, it's an Ameren issue, so they'll code it to, it's an Ameren power source issue that feeds our signal. So it's not anything we can do, but we'll coordinate with Ameren, for example. So that's in a nutshell how the process works and how it's identified from the public side, how it's hard-coded to the people that deal with it within the department, and how they resolve it so the public can go back online and check the status of their complaint.
So, thank you, Jamie, that's a good explanation. I guess where the breakdown is people are putting in these requests, and then a week later, whether it's a refuse problem or a street light problem, it's not been fixed. It's been closed. So when they're tracking it online, it says closed, but there's no resolution. I mean, the problem still exists. What's happening there?
I don't know. I'd have to see exactly if they say work completed or no problem found. I don't know what the...
Yeah, it doesn't...
It says closed, no public resolution?
Correct. Yeah. And I'll give you one.
Yeah, maybe
offline, I'll get you one as an example. Just
usually, because they're
it's
only allowed
increasingly frustrating to tell constituents to use this service, and then it doesn't work. And I don't think it's the employees of these various departments. I think it's getting lost somewhere in the city's IT system or whatever, because I don't believe that we've got city employees that are just saying, oh, I got this request for service and I'm just going to close it and not do anything about it. I don't think that's happening.
Right. Actually, I mean, literally, I do these too. So, I mean, when you're on the worker side, the city worker side, there's a button to close it, but you can't close it, so you put a public resolution to it. So I couldn't even choose to just close it and not put something to it. So I'd have to see what maybe that example is.
I'll send you some request numbers. We can look at this together, because it's really frustrating to have to tell constituents, use this service. Oh, wait, the problem's still there. Then they email me, then I email you.
Right.
And, we've just spinning our wheels. But, all right, that's all my questions. Thank you, Jamie.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Hello, Jamie.
Morning.
Alderman Coder asked a question. You said you have 50 trucks. So my question is, what is the plan? Because I hear loud and clear from my colleagues that it's a trash issue across the city. And so it's been a trash issue in North St. Louis, and people gave me the bill of sales that North St. Louis has less trash, which is not true. But I just want to know, as the refuge department, what is the plan? Because I don't think it's fair to Randy that I'm constantly shooting emails. Can you check this? Can you make sure this? And if we had a plan in place, then I think it would be less stress on him, because he's getting hit hard, because he's hearing this wasn't picked up, this not right. So does the refuge department, with all the complaints that's coming across the board citywide, have a plan in place to say, we know it's an issue, but this is how we're going to address it to start correcting it piece by piece?
It is, and I'll reference back to what I was saying. We have the truck replacement program, that's fine, but right now what we're dealing with, what you're describing, it is driving them in different areas, because as I described, if you're in the hole every day in the red as far as what you can cover with your manpower to those routes because of some of our truck situations, you're always inevitably mathematically going to have an issue covering those. So it ends up being, I can pick this up, but that meant all of a sudden I missed that. But we're doing that on a Monday, Tuesday, if we're missing something there, we're working overtime and trying to pick it up on Wednesday. So it does involve a lot of rescheduling and stuff, and that is a burden on Randy and the refuse folks to try to keep up with that mathematical problem on those Monday, Tuesday, cover it Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, cover it Saturday, and even Sunday. So it's literally daily an issue as far as scheduling to check what's been completed, what is incomplete, and then assign it for the next day. So we make sure once the crews roll out, they're able to resolve that on that off day to make up for the previous 2 days. So it is a scheduling nightmare. But again, it'd be, again, an even worse situation when in that truck plan coming. So kind of what helps us sleep at night is that we have this plan coming, and what we're dealing with right now will not last forever, and it's going to be greatly different by the end of the year. So that's kind of what helps us sleep at night, honestly.
Well, I guess my question, because what I'm hearing, and if I'm off, tell me, you're saying the average daily run of trucks is 50 a day?
We average 45 to 50 trucks available. So my answer on Monday was I think we were 48, and I think today we're 50. So it could be 45 next week. It could be 52. Every day is different. What they can fix, what happened that certain day, what they're able to get back out, the mechanics back out by the next morning, that type of thing. So it's every day we get a spreadsheet that tells us how many trucks are up for the following day, so that we can schedule accordingly.
So, as I keep hearing, they have staff that are standing around waiting on trucks. So how are we handling that? Because if you're telling me it's 45 to 50 trucks out daily, so why are we having staff? We have more staff than trucks, that's what I'm hearing.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And so we need, on the average, how many trucks to bring it up where staff is not standing?
We would at a bare minimum need 55, and with what we've described as far as the age of our vehicles, the type of work that they do, I would want 10 more trucks than that, just because, for example, one truck was listed as up today, it went out and it came back in. So I mean, you would want that buffer to be able to assure that you hit those 55. I would not pick exactly 55, so I'd want some buffer to allow for anything that happens with vehicles. So if we have 55 routes, I'd like 65 or 70, honestly.
Okay.
Ensure that we have that service, that ability to fall back.
So the HR director said they had 39 people waiting to come to work. So you need 39 more trucks?
No, I'm saying if we average 50 trucks if 50 trucks, for example, is our average, I would need 5 additional to meet our daily demand of 55. I would like more as a buffer. We have enough drivers for that. It's just we need the trucks to match the people, so they're not standing around.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome.
Alderman Bosley.
Thank you for being here, Jamie. How's it going? Appreciate you last night also. I just kind of like to get down to just, I guess I would say the root of everything so everybody can have an understanding. Excuse my voice, I'm kind of losing it. Excuse me. So everybody can kind of have an understanding just from, I guess, from the smallest perspective that we can get. So sometimes we are thinking so large and people don't really have an understanding of what's happening at the very bottom. How long are these routes, each one of them? Because if we have, I think we have, 85 routes? Is that what we said yesterday? I'm sorry, I might be mistaken.
55 routes per day.
55 routes per day.
Traditionally they're designed around a 10-hour collection day.
All right, so we have 55 routes, and on an average, we have 50 trucks that are running 45 to 50.
Correct.
So I guess generally, it's about 5 to 10 routes each day that don't get run.
Correct.
Right? And are those routes specific to certain neighborhoods? And I know we've already talked about, just everybody asked, or, it's not about special treatment. I kind of understand that the drivers get to pick the trucks. The seasoned drivers get to pick the trucks, right? And they also choose their route that they want, correct?
By seniority, yes.
By seniority,
Yes.
what season? Well, the
Right,
same thing,
yep,
right?
yep,
By seniority.
yep,
Sorry,
gotcha.
sorry,
No,
by
yeah,
seniority.
Yep.
So with that, if I was a seasoned driver or a driver with seniority and I have put 10 years into the city, and the truck started to break down, I would want the easiest route so I can get home to my family, at the time that I was getting home to my family 10 years beforehand, or, when things were working adequately and we were working smoothly, right?
Right.
So to some degree, with those individuals getting all of the new trucks and we just got 18, is it kind of fair to say that they are in the places where the routes are easier, where you'd have better dump trucks, number one. Number two, you'd have a higher population or more densely populated area that could service more individuals?
Our routes were designed with a balanced approach. I don't know if there's exactly an easy route, maybe.
Well, I'm sure some of them
another
would
one
consider
slightly
something.
easier. Well, right, yeah. In general, though, I would say our routes were from a balanced approach. There wasn't one that was extremely easy, could be finished in 2 hours, and the other one takes not only 10 hours but 12 hours to collect. And then that also route can vary day to day or week to week as far as the load it takes on. It may be easier one day than it is the next after holidays. So I think that varies. I wouldn't say, though, that there's routes that are so much easier than the other routes.
Well, understood, but once again, with people being seasoned, they would, I guess one of the questions would be, how do you choose the routes? How are those routes broken down? How do we break them down by population? Are they broken down by, how much you generally take to the dump? How are the routes chosen?
Actually, I could have them step up here and describe the bidding process for the routes and then how they were kind of originally designed.
I think that'd be something good for people to understand.
This has been in place for a while historically, so I think Nick can describe how it kind of came about and how those selections are completed.
Generally, a route runs about 1,200.
Nick, go ahead and introduce yourself again.
Generally, a route runs around 1,250 homes for dumpsters. On carts, it's like 800 homes per route. We do make adjustments occasionally, but normally a driver will keep the same route.
Right. So as far as you break them down by, you said 800 homes of service per route.
800 on the carts and 1,250 roughly on the dumpsters.
So is that one route that a person would run per day? He'd pick up 1,250 dumpsters and 800 rollout carts.
Not 1,250 dumpsters, but the number of dumpsters we have on that route services usually about 3 or 4 homes. So it would be less than 1,250. But that's our general.
Right. The reason I asked the question is, say for instance in the Central West End, right, we have a more denser population than there would be, on the west side of St. Louis in some places, and also on the north side. I know where I live. I've got 4 vacant buildings in between my home, and then there's a neighbor. So there's less people that you actually serve who are paying a trash bill, which the city would see, but that doesn't mean those dumpsters aren't filled up with trash from around the area. Because trash might not be picked up because the population isn't as dense as it would be if you're servicing homes, which is the number, opposed to the actual, service that's needed. So the question is, as far as if you're going by homes, would it make a difference in the route if, say, for instance, my house or my block only has 2 homeowners, but has 5 houses and 6 dumpsters? Because there's a dumpster behind every house, but there's not someone that's a resident living in those houses paying the trash fee, but nonetheless, the trash is needed to be picked up. So in an area in the Central West End where you'd have 200 or 300 individuals living in one kind of densely populated area, are you looking at that saying, hey, we're serving 50 people with picking up this one dumpster in this one alley if we go through and knock off 10 of them because we have a few buildings here that service that.
Obviously, we don't know how many people are living in each home. We normally get complaints if the dumpster is always overflowing in normal times, and we go out and put in extra dumpsters if they're needed. So, but adding 1 or 2 dumpsters per route really doesn't affect the workload that much.
Right. Well, I guess maybe I worded it a little wrong. What I'm saying is not necessarily adding dumpsters, but between, an area where you have 5 or 6 vacant homes that still have dumpsters, but they don't have a trash bill, right? We all pay that bill so you all can come and pick up the trash while being serviced. So if the routes are broken down by population, and there is an area with a less dense population than the other, does that area with the more dense population get serviced quicker, once again, because the routes are done by, they're broken down by actual homes, not by, I guess, vacant buildings. I'm just trying to get, once again, down to the root so people can really understand what's going on. I think the city has a big issue. It's not necessarily the refuse department, but vacancy does play a big part in why services aren't being equitable across the entire city. So it's good to point those things out so people can have a general understanding of the area that they live in and why city services might sometimes seem unbalanced. And it's, you might still be paying that same amount, and everybody hears that this area might be getting service more than the other. And sometimes things might be a little weirder than we think, but it's always good to have an understanding of what's realistic and logical. So that's the reason I'm asking.
I've looked at all the routes and the tonnage, and there's not much discrepancy between the highest and lowest, so it's more volume-based. So a route that's not as dense may be longer to make up for that volume. I think that's probably what the answer is here. It may be less territory for a dense area to pick up that same volume, but stretched out farther to pick up that volume on a less dense area.
So safe to say, because it takes a little bit longer for that route to be picked up, it might take a little more time, let's say a stretch of 2 or 3 days, because trucks aren't working correctly to be able to pick that trash up the way that you would like to, because the route is a little bit longer. It's not necessarily this part of town or that part of town, but it's because of the routes could be longer in a less denser population, correct?
Partially, I would say, though, once we hit that 10-hour point, then that's a point where you would look at that route was probably broken into another route instead of one route takes multiple days. But to base on that volume and that 10 hours, if it got beyond that, we'd break it into another route.
Understood.
But the approach is correct from what you just said.
Thank you. So in time, and I understand that things won't be exactly what we need them to be today or next year, because we still have another about 10 years to even get all of the trucks that we say we need to pick up trash adequately. So with that, the city is dwindling as far as our population. And I think the less money we have, sometimes it's harder to be able to keep up with particular services because we had to cut services out. I would just like everybody, especially you being in the position that you are, to think ahead. So when we get to 2018, 2028, we won't be in the same situation trying to figure out how to deal with trucks if we finally get to where we want to be with building our population up going the correct way, because we still have vacancies across the entire city, and it affects the Central West End, it affects every part of town, so we affect each other regardless. So I think each department has a responsibility to make sure there's a plan in place for us going into the future to make sure the issues that we face now on a revolving door, and we don't have to continue to kind of beat the wheel, because, you know how it is. I most certainly have a lot of individuals who feel like their trash isn't being picked up, but I have a general understanding of kind of why things are the way that they are. I would just like in 3 or 4 years from now us to say, hey, we still don't have these trucks, but service is a little bit better than what it was last year, and it's measurable. We know how much quicker we might be picking up these routes that take a little bit longer. We know that the seasoned drivers are getting the better routes because they also are picking the better trucks. So when we get these other 14 or 15 in that we're saying we're getting, we might want to skip that up or move that around just a little bit so we can balance this out to a degree. Of course, we might not get them all, but to have 3 or 4 running at the same time where you have 15 running on another part of town where the routes are chosen by seasoned driver, I think it kind of helps out a little bit, and people really get to start seeing some type of a balance in the city.
Right, and I will say we will see a big difference once we get those 15 additional by the end of the year. But back to your part of your question, my mind is exactly right in the here and now, but I'm also in parallel, even this morning and last night was talking about the exact same subject, about being forward-thinking on what happens on the next plan, because I, for one, don't want to end up in the same boat, or I don't want those that come after me to be in the same boat of being in a situation where they have to work these extended hours. And I said it last night, and I've said it to a lot of different folks when they ask about what the city is doing in the interim while we wait for these trucks and this fee increase to really take full effect. Our workforce, our guys, some of which are here today, are the guys that have truly been making the sacrifices and working these hours. All of a sudden, you're a night guy working till 8 o'clock. I mean, anybody with a family knows how that works. And even if you're the 4 a.m. guy, that obviously affects your night when you're going to bed. So they've taken the burden and the weight on their shoulders as we go through this. And I don't believe they've got enough credit, or there's not enough credit actually to give, because it's just their sacrifices have been massive, and they continue to be that way as we work through and try to push through the situation. And our light at the end of the tunnel is that with these 15 new trucks coming by the end of the year and the 16 that we've already got in hand, that obviously, like I said, infuses our fleet with some youth as far as our equipment. So hopefully that gives them a little hope that there's an end to this, and what they're going through now is not indefinite.
This is my last question. Thank you. Is there anything that you need from us, as a board? Of course, we...
Trash trucks.
Yeah,
Sorry,
of course.
I didn't want to take the obvious
It's
joke
all
there.
good. So we worked on that, but is anything that we maybe can tell the residents in our ward, just anything we can do, because we all collectively have to work together on things. It's just we're asking you questions.
Right.
I just want to make sure if you have anything that you feel like when you're sitting down at home, if I could do this or we could do that, this could be.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate more than I can even say that you asked me that question. A lot of times when we watch the news, I try not to even watch it that much anymore. I don't mind the message that gets out if it was in entirety, but I don't like when people only hear part of it. I'm an engineer that if there's a problem, we come up with a solution. And when I only hear the problem identified, in everyone's defense, the residents, if they don't hear that we're working on a solution or anything, you might think the worst case, we're not doing anything. I just want the folks to know that we are trying a bunch of different things. We've got the trucks coming. We are getting creative on all third iteration of our manpower and our workforce. I just want the residents to know that we are trying, and it's not for lack of effort. We're trying to provide the best services we can with some of these obstacles in our way. So if folks, your residents, your constituents talk to you about what the city is doing, I'd be greatly appreciative if you could and describe. You don't have to agree with everything I say, but at least describe what we are doing. We're always open to new things. We've got a lot of expertise that have spent a lot of time trying to come up with this. None of these work hours were anything desired. It's not an ideal thing to work some of these hours. It's logistically the best we could come up with to come over these obstacles. But if you could describe that to your constituents that we are trying, it's a high priority for the mayor. It's a high priority for us. Just that we're trying, and there's no lack of effort, and hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel.
All right, we'll do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Martin.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for coming last night and coming again this morning. So I have one question, because a lot of this stuff we're repeating and rehashing here from last night. One thing that came to light last night is that one ward is getting an additional route. And that comes from, I believe, a higher up than you, if that's a direction. But I just want to know why one ward is getting an additional route when obviously some are barely getting any.
I don't know about additional route. The routes have been the way they have been for a long time. When we miss collections, we do hear from the various aldermen. And like we were talking earlier with Randy and all of our leadership trying to reschedule routes that have been missed, whether it's you or Alderman Coder or anybody that point out a route that's been missed that we know. It may be hotter because you guys have heard about it and you're telling us, but I wouldn't say anybody receives better service than another alderman. Those routes were already predetermined. What I can't control sometimes are the guys that are, maybe the guy's sick, so he's not on his route that week, and that's a route that all of a sudden has to be picked up by somebody else. So week to week, we maybe would see a variation in that service, but by design, there's no one ward receiving more.
Okay, because my understanding is that, I believe it was last Friday, an order came in to run another route in a ward. And I know firsthand, I live in Holly Hills, and we have zero trash problems, but I can go to other parts of the city, even in other parts of my ward, and much like Alderman Bosley saying, like, there is a discrepancy. But I tend to believe some drivers when they say they got special orders to go back again in another ward.
Where we've seen, I guess, repeated problems or the volume changing, sometimes we empty and all of a sudden they're filled up. We have heard from people that they've been stacking some trash internal before putting in the dumpster that may be reportedly full, that once we do empty it and then they go refill it, so then it's full and it is back in a condition that needs to be emptied. Those are ones that by special attention we have to run out and get that outside of our normal. If it's overflowing, that's kind of when we triage what we do. If we hear one that's overflowing, we do go out and service that within 48 hours, trying to get that issue resolved. But that special attention would be towards any of the aldermen that would bring up something like that, because we don't have the ability to monitor those cans to tell us when they're overflowing, so it kind of becomes a complaint-driven thing. So whether it's a resident through CSB or an alderman reporting that they've got a condition in their alley that's outside of the norm, we would run and try to address that.
Okay. I mean, by that nature, other wards that, I mean, you drive through and there's just piles and piles of trash. I mean, there's been sitting there for months.
I will note that as a follow-up, when an issue, whether it's a CSB or an alderman or someone brings up to our attention that there's been a report of an overflowing dumpster, our foreman will go check it out. It's not simply a truck is dispatched and pulled off a route instantaneously. There is a filter prior to the workforce being pulled from something, or more specifically being added to their work for the day.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Middlebrook.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think my question will be directed more towards Randy, if he could come up. Okay. Good
Randy,
morning,
go ahead and
Randy.
introduce yourself.
Okay, Randy Bridenfeld, I'm Deputy Refuse Commissioner. Good morning.
Good morning, Randy. My question or comment, I guess, would be regarding dumping at the city dump. One of the biggest issues that I have encountered is when I have something to dump and I call my dad, who has a pickup truck, and he comes and get whatever it is I have. We go to the city dump, and he's not allowed to dump it because perhaps he's been there earlier that month, and we're told, no, you can't dump because your truck has been here. But it's my right to dump my stuff. I don't have a truck. I don't want to buy a truck, not when I have a dad who has a truck and can do this for me. Why is that he can't dump my stuff for me when I'm in the truck? And this has happened. A neighbor who's 100 years old, who doesn't drive anymore, asked him to do the same thing, and we have constituents throughout the ward who ask him, well, this debris has been here for 3 weeks. Can you please come pick this up and take it to the city dump for us? We don't have a truck. And it's no, even though they have their license and they're going with him. I would think that would lead to illegal dumping, because unlike me, I can put it in a garage and wait. Some people aren't going to do that. They're going to say, okay, I don't want it here anymore. I'm just going to go throw it somewhere. Is that something that can be corrected? Even though, it's his truck, but I'm with him and it's my stuff. I shouldn't have to rent a truck or find someone else who has a truck when my dad has a truck and can do it for me, and I'm with him and I live in the city and I have my ID. That's an issue.
I agree. I'm sure a lot of people that get turned away probably do just go out and dump in at alleys. The only thing I can say, we can look into that, but, basically, my operators that are at the citizen dump, they keep records of who's been there every day, so if they see that the same person's been there, they're gonna turn them away. Not saying that's gonna be permanent forever, we'll look at anything. I mean, we can look at anything. That's why we open the dump on Saturday, because a lot of people can't come to the dump Monday through Friday. So, yeah, we're always willing to look at other alternatives.
I think that would be a good idea to look into it, because again, if I'm showing my ID to dump stuff that I feel I don't want in my home anymore, it shouldn't be a problem if I'm using his truck.
Right, and I
It's me in the
understand.
truck with him.
And I understand
know.
some people that don't have that option, they rent a truck as long as they show that their water bill, but I know a lot of
Right.
people can't do that, so
Right.
I understand your concern.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, let's go through our colleagues. Right, Joe Vaccaro has more seniority. Why don't you go ahead and ask a question or comment?
I got actually a question and a comment. Comment, I do want to thank Randy and Nick for putting up with me. I call probably more than anybody on the planet, and I go out and take pictures, and I drive my alleys every day, and I send stuff, and I write nasty letters to the mayor and complain. And I understand that's really, you're dealing with a problem that's not of your own creation. Our route, my neighborhood does not get treated any more special than anybody else, although I've been accused of it, and maybe because I complain more, but we don't get any special treatment. There's certain areas in our ward that get missed pretty consistent, and we take pictures and I moan and yell. But I do want to thank you guys for, like I said, you're just managing that, and you have to deal with what you have to deal with. I'm curious of two things. How many people don't pay that trash bill, and have we considered getting rid of the, where you can opt out? Because I'm sure there's a lot of money that could be picked up, and people are just saying, gee, you know what, I'm going to opt out.
City Council's office does pursue those people. I'm sorry. The City Council's office does pursue those people that don't pay their trash bill. What was the other part of your question?
Well, I mean, so is there a lot of that money out there? The other one, maybe we should think about getting away from where you can opt out, because what's happening, at least what I've seen, and I don't have a lot of rental apartments in my neighborhood, but what I have seen is where somebody who owns a 4-family or 2 4-family flats gets the smallest dumpster you could possibly buy, gets a once-a-month pickup in their residence consistently, and I think you guys are familiar with the one on Chippewa, where they're consistently, I'm having to call you guys to come pick up their mess, and they're opting out of this. And it almost seems like, the people are opting out there. Maybe we need better regulations on the size of their dumpsters for the amount of people, or get away from opting out, because again, my biggest issues generally come in areas where I have rental, like 4 families that have opted out, where they got 2 or 3, and they'll get one of the tiniest little dumpsters for what would be 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 4 families. And again, I know Randy and Nick are familiar with my Chippewa one. Every so often, like every other week, somebody's moving out, and I'm having to call because all the stuff's put behind the neighbor's house, and I appreciate that,
We
you guys-
wouldn't have any problem eliminating the opt-out option. An example was Washington University owns a lot of buildings off Skinker, and they went with private collection, and they said it was so bad they came back to city collection because their billing is terrible, they don't answer their complaints, and they wanted city service, so they went back to it.
Well, these are people that, like I said, it would be like as if I opted out in my house and got one single little trash can, stuck it out back, called somebody, said, hey, come by with the pickup truck once a month. But the whole rest of the time, it's unrealistic that I can put all my trash in that dumpster. So now I'm using all the city dumpsters, but not paying for that. Yeah, and the bulk,
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I
Yeah, I
almost
think
think that.
the enforcement side of to opt out, you have to have the comparable service, so there's obviously an enforcement arm of that would need to make sure what you're saying doesn't happen. And as Nick said, we're definitely open to eliminating opt-out or considering eliminating it. At this point, that's one more variable I probably wouldn't want to throw in the situation right now, but it is obviously something that we're thinking of.
Okay. I have no other, I just want to, like I said, I'm probably the biggest complainer. I just want to explain, we don't get special treatment, but I do appreciate Nick and Randy for putting up with me. And the mayor as far as that goes. There's some pretty nasty stuff. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Christina Gracia.
Good morning. Thanks again for spending some time with us this morning. A few questions, probably for both of you. Can you speak a little bit to what's creating the ongoing issue of multiple dumpsters being missed multiple times? So I have areas since August of 2017 where I've received complaints. There's really no rhyme or reason to where it is, but always in the Gate District, Fox Park and Tower Grove East, where it could be 2 or 3 weeks before yard waste gets picked up, or 2 or 3 weeks before recycling gets picked up, or solid waste. And when I asked the mayor's office what the best way to address that was, I was told to just personally figure out where those dumpsters are and tell Randy, which I figure is probably not the best way to problem solve. And to piggyback off that question, I'm curious if our trucks have GPS on them?
They do.
Okay.
We're actually right in the process with the new trucks of upgrading that whole platform for more abilities and more. I think what we had before was kind of a legacy system that was much, much older. So this is, while we're upgrading, I guess I could have mentioned that before, while we're upgrading these trucks, we're also upgrading the ability to monitor those cameras on them as well of the collections, besides just the GPS abilities.
So can you speak to maybe what's happening? And I don't feel like I'm alone in this. I've spoken to multiple colleagues, which is sort of what led to the town hall, and then Alderman Boyd being gracious enough to schedule something off session, that this is a pretty significant problem in a number of areas.
No, historic problem with collections. That is.
I mean, it's definitely more. It's
I hear what
definitely
you're saying.
a bigger problem now, but I've started getting complaints about it in August of 2017.
For specific or numerous locations, or is this a?
For Fox Park, Tower Grove East, in the Gate District, but not always in the same alleys. I mean, most recently I contacted Greg Hayes. He was going to put out a dumpster for me in Fox Park and Tower Grove East. I can send you the pictures. It was absolutely disgusting.
I don't have an answer why something would be historic. I mean, like I was describing, our routes are based on that volume and equaling that out for our routes. I don't know why, unless there's, but historically it wouldn't make sense either. I described the variation you could have from week to week, but nothing on a consistent basis.
Are you reviewing whatever? Like, is the GPS spitting out some sort of report that you guys are reviewing to see where?
Yeah, that's what it has, that ability to show you the travel speed through there and amount of stop time, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, I would be happy to work with you guys to.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to. I want to be able to answer you, so if we can look at those areas and we can research, and I think I could give you an intelligible answer. I think I'd be speculating right now, but by design, that shouldn't be happening. So
Okay. Would it be helpful if I work with my colleagues I know that are having similar issues to come up with some alleys, like the 100 blocks or something?
Sure. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. Can you spoke a little bit about the trucks and the new trucks and the issues that we're having with them. Can you talk a little bit about sort of, I know that we get the chassis from one place, the body is from another place, they're both out of state. Is it from one or other of the vendors? Is it both? Are we looking, I mean, does it make sense to look at getting different vendors? I'm just sort of curious how that process looks if we're having that much trouble with brand new trucks.
I wouldn't say we're having that much problems with them. I think with any of these vehicles, no matter what vendor you're going to, and the amount of work that these trucks do, something inevitably would happen. I think a vast majority of our issues are on the older vehicles, not the new. We do get our chassis from a vendor, and then we've got the bodies for the cart collection and bodies for the alley collection come from different places too. And that stuff's bid out, so there's a certain amount of performance specifications that we list to be able to bid on it. It needs to be able to do A through Z in order to qualify as a bid, and that's what it is.
And if there's warranty work being done, I'm assuming that has to go to vendor
Certified vendor,
approved?
yes,
Right, so
yes.
is there a place in St. Louis where that's happening, or is that creating even more of a delay if the truck has to go somewhere else before it's brought back online?
There are local deals, I don't know if you want to say any more, but there are local vendors that do that warranty work.
Okay. Since the scheduling for the refuse workers has changed 3 times, how is your department working with the shop stewards or the AFSCME rep to make sure that, in some reason, that they feel part of the conversation? Or is it more just like they show up to work one day and they have a letter that says, hey, by the way, starting today or next week or whenever, this is what we're doing?
We've worked with the shop stewards and the union rep through this. We've come up with, our leadership's been coming up with these revised work plans and logistics plans of how to do these collections with the amount of vehicles that we have. And each time we come up with a plan, we get together with them and present it to them and take questions. We're always, like I said to you guys and I've said to everybody, even last night, always open to other possibilities and options. The expertise we have from all the years of experience doing this lends to those discussions of how we've come up with those plans. So we do work with them, and they are met with. We do give the proper notice of our work, when the work hours will take effect.
When you say proper notice, is that pursuant to the contract, or?
Just like 2 weeks' notice of any change in the daily work hours for our staff.
Okay. And I'm sort of stepping into this in the middle of a lot of things that have happened, but I've spent a decent amount of time recently speaking to refuse workers, and I'm sure some of it is just there's going to be some bad feelings because of the bad situation, but I really empathize with them and feel like they've been taken advantage of and that they're not valued by the city and that no one really particularly has much in respect to maybe doing a little bit better on the part of the city with respect to engagement and some more comprehensive problem solving. I understand that trucks are definitely an issue, but there may be some more going on. So if I can be helpful in conversations in that regard, I think we're really lucky to have the level of workers that we do, that work as hard as we do. We're really lucky that we have a unionized force. And some of these folks, I think probably most of them are making way less than they could in other places, and they're still staying with us. And so if we can help them feel valued and get them to a place where they're feeling, even though under a stressful situation, that there's an end in sight, I would really like to be a part of those conversations.
Right, and those my door's open. I've several guys come in on a regular basis and talk to me. Our superintendent, Nick, Randy, everybody's open and have been open, and those discussions have gone on while informal. I stand out in the halls talking with people. I've heard the spectrum of different perspectives on these issues too. I like to take the input from everybody, and you hear that full spectrum, and then you're able to make a more educated decision, and that's what we've attempted to do. I couldn't value these guys anymore. I've already described what they do and what they're doing on a daily basis to help us overcome this. So my appreciation is off the charts for them, and I'll keep telling everybody that asks me the same thing.
Okay. And then just to reiterate, management in refuse is choosing where drivers go if they're on overtime or if they get pulled for another route, correct?
If we get to a circumstance like a Wednesday, for example, what we haven't done on a Monday, Tuesday, we'll ask for volunteers for overtime, folks that are looking for it. Then after that, we obviously have work that is incomplete that we'll have on a mandatory basis assigned to workers to complete those routes. Otherwise, if it was left just to volunteer, it may work out one day when you have the ability, more manpower wants to work overtime. But if there was a situation where there wasn't, we'd be in an even deeper hole than we already are in.
Okay. All right. And I guess just lastly as a comment, again, if I can be helpful in any of this, let me know. I feel like until last week, there was no real communication about what was happening. I think all of us knew as aldermen that there was a big problem going on, that trucks were some of the issue, but when we communicate with each other in silos, it really prevents a lot of he said, she said. No one has the full picture. I'm sure you guys have heard it too. I mean, my residents are like stopping me at the gas station with my kids in front of me and, yelling, dropping the F-bomb, and I haven't heard from anyone about, what, how to resolve the issue, what the problems are. So if we could have some, even if you guys come back in a few months and just update us on what's going on, I think a lot of us feel pretty in the dark.
At times when you're faced with these things, I honestly feel a little too focused on an issue on a particular week, but where I don't see other parts of the department even. So, but my point of that is I get so focused and we get so focused on these things, addressing these problems that are critical in nature to the service we provide to the residents, that we do oftentimes, we're so busy working on the solution that we don't let folks know that we are working on a solution. So I would absolutely encourage scheduling future get-togethers or open these communication lines even more. Never have been opposed to communicating what we're doing. Do I get too busy doing what I'm doing and not think about letting everybody know where we're at with different things, or at least at some major milestones, let folks know where we're at with things? Absolutely. Because again, you guys are the link to the constituents, so I think you should know anyway, and you guys are also the conduit to the residents to help get that word out, as I was describing earlier, that to let them know that we are working on things and we're not too focused on the issue, that we shouldn't be able to relay that or communicate that.
Okay. Thanks to both of you, and congratulations on your retirement. Looks like you're escaping at just the right moment.
It's the right time for me.
There you go. I've got a couple questions for the personnel director, but thanks, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Good morning. How's it going?
Going well, thank you.
Good. Thanks for taking some time with us this morning. I kind of wanted to touch base on the 39 qualified people you mentioned.
Right.
And then I noticed on the city's website we have 2 collection positions open, and one is a per performance.
That's correct.
And then one is, I guess, the traditional sort of the union workers. And so I'm curious what the process is to start a per performance recruitment, and if those positions are temporary or permanent, and if those positions are, the 39 people are part of the more per performance applicants or the workers who would become union members.
Okay. Well, first I want to clarify a couple different things that are going on right now, and I've shared this with Chairman Boyd, but we're referring to like union contracts. There isn't one. The AFSCME Local 410 is certainly a recognized group by the State Board of Mediation. But due to internal problems, it was taken over by the Missouri Council 72, which was led by Eric Moore. That council then was dissolved, and no collective bargaining agreement was reached. We went into negotiations with a different group, which is AFSCME 61, and I received a letter from the chairman of the State Board of Mediation, Todd Smith, that they do not recognize that for any city employee. So there is no union contract. Now, I will say that AFSCME and Refuse did have a memorandum of understanding / collective bargaining agreement that was signed and expired in December of 2017, but it had an evergreen clause in it. Anything that has an evergreen clause is not a true contract. A contract, in order to be a true contract, has to, number one, have a beginning date and an ending date. And then secondly, in order for it to be enforceable, under the provisions of Ordinance 62234, it needs to come to this Board of Aldermen, and it did not. And we do not have any, despite our best efforts, we don't have any union contract with AFSCME. Originally, Ben Harmon stated at the Civil Service Commission meeting that the membership was supportive and they thought they would vote for the pay plan. They ended up not doing that. So there is no enforceable.
I'm sorry, can you explain the membership?
Yeah, the membership is Local 410.
Okay.
But it's unclear as to what its governance is. And as a result of that, we don't have any collective bargaining agreement or any contract that is in place right now for these workers. They still have local shop stewards. We have communication with them. But that is one issue. In terms of the applicants, we have 27 people that we have on the full-time list who are ready to go. And we also had a number of people who we just certified. One of the problems that I think everybody needs to realize is that because of the decrease in equipment, we have not been in a static state in terms of our total number of refuse workers. I know here from 2000 to 2015, we had 82 people, full-time positions on our table of organization. However, as of 2019, we've dropped to 67 workers. That's a 20% decrease. We have not had a 20% decrease in the amount of trash pickup. So you're seeing natural implications of a tremendous reduction in the number of full-time positions. I had to actually authorize some emergency work, I think it was 2 weeks ago, because only 39 people were available to work on that day, not even enough to fill the positions. And so that's why we pushed, and Linda assisted me in certifying people in the per performance to be able to take over those routes. We had people out on workers' compensation. We've had people who are out on family medical leave. We literally only had 39 people for that day. So, you know, my assumption is here as an HR director is the city's cut too deep in terms of the number of positions that it's authorized. And hopefully with the these new equipment coming in, we'll be able to look at that and find out exactly how many people we need. So the per performance list has been in existence since April, and we've just certified a number of people over to the refuse division. They're going to be using those people so that when we do have staff vacancies out of this smaller number of 67, we'll be able to make sure that those routes are traveled. I will also say, and I do want to say this, is that in terms of these routes, you know, we're talking about 10-hour shifts, but not everybody works a 10-hour shift. There's been something that I've never approved of, I've never authorized in any agreement, where some of the more senior AFSCME workers were allowed to go home after they completed their routes. So we literally had instances where we had to, well, we saw that people would leave after 3 or 4 hours, and they didn't go to somebody else's route. Now, this is a grandfathered process. The new workers are not allowed to do that. So when I originally met with some members of administration, they presented me with a change to schedule that was for 8-hour days. That's 32 hours a week, which violates the compensation ordinance and the charter. In addition to that, for the people who are newer, they had to work 10-hour days. So there are some logistical problems here that really need to be discussed, and I think the Board of Aldermen needs to be aware of. It's not just equipment, it's staffing issues. And
I can't tell you how much I appreciate you saying that, because that's what we keep hearing, is
and
it's
that's
just the
why
trucks.
you see certain people. My people are wonderful. Whoever works on my block, and I live over off Compton and Arsenal, and I've had people shot 2 doors down. I have never had a problem. The guys that work in my area, I've seen them break their backs picking up illegal dumping. I've never had a problem. And yet I know wealthier areas where there have been problems. It's like any other kind of performance. There are some people who are going to do their job and are going to really kill themselves, and we're very fortunate to have those. But I also up until 2 or 3 months ago, approved every piece of discipline. And the number one thing that we saw coming out of refuse were people who were speeding because they're driving 55 or 60 miles an hour down Gravois to try and get home to their routes, or they were not picking up all of their trash. And so they would then have to go back. We'd have to give overtime to somebody else to cover that route, which costs the city, and then the other person was disciplined. Well, if we discipline the people and they're suspended, what happens then? You're even more short. So these are some things that administration within the department really has to take a hard look at.
Are you able to, I understand a lot of the information is protected, but are you able to provide information to the board on how many people are written up and disciplined for speeding, how that's determined, if it's, a traffic ticket, or what data you have to prove that they're not picking up all the trash?
When I can tell you that when the discipline comes in front of me, the refuse, Nick always did a fantastic job at actually taking photographs. So there's photographs of the trash bins that haven't been emptied, or they've taken photographs of where the trash that's recyclable and not recyclable has been mixed together.
Is the GPS data included in that? Just because I'm sure it's not typical, but I'm sure if you said that a dumpster was not empty, in St. Louis City, within 5 minutes, a dumpster could be empty and then completely full again.
That's an excellent point, Alderwoman, because we do now, as part of the disciplinary process, receive location. And so the appointing authorities will send in to us if a worker was not where they were supposed to be, and that's certainly, been the case as well, in all departments with GPS. So this isn't just unique, but the scheduling, one of the things I'm glad to hear that people are working 10-hour days, because if they're working 4 10-hour days, that's what they need to be doing. Otherwise, that's a big problem.
Okay, and then just going back to the union issue, and I apologize for my ignorance, is there a certain date of the year, I'm assuming, that you have to have the contracts approved for the next fiscal year? Or has this ever happened before? Like, what happens if our refuse workers are in limbo?
Well, we have 13, we did have 13 labor unions, and we've got signed collective bargaining agreements through 2020 with 11 of those 13. We are still in negotiations with the SLPLO, and with AFSCME, they voted, we agreed to disagree. But again, since that time, we have been instructed by the State Board of Mediation that the AFSCME 61 is not recognized by them. So I have no authority, nor the comptroller, to send dues monies or anything to an organization that I don't know.
Okay, so if the workers themselves were interested in problem solving, or I were interested in helping, what are next best steps? If they're not recognized, then how?
Well, Local 410 is, but what's curious is I just received a piece of correspondence, but it was not signed by Ben Harmon, who was the purported administrator for Local 410. It was signed by a person who is outside the city of St. Louis. So, my advice and guidance to AFSCME is that they need to work with the State Board of Mediation to become recognized. Of course, with the change to, I believe it's Senate Committee Substitute 2 for House Bill 1413, all unions except public safety unions are going to have to become, I think within 1 year of August 2018, are going to have an election and thereafter be recertified, so that there's a big change in the landscape. But we're always happy to sit down with, AFSCME 410 and talk.
Because they're not unionized right now, is there a possibility that they could work with another union other than AFSCME?
It's possible that if they're anytime a union is no longer satisfied with their representation, if they take a 30% show of cards and they send those to me, that is enough to trigger an election. And then if the membership, in the past it used to be a simple majority of the people who vote in the election would determine whether or not they could decertify the union. Under House Bill 1413, it's now a majority of the workers in the bargaining unit itself.
Okay.
So there's dramatic changes on that landscape, but some of the things that we've done in terms of working with refuse administration, we appreciate this, is we've got banners, on some of the trucks now to advertise. We have done, what we found was that a lot of people would come in for heavy equipment operator 2s, and once they learned that it was in refuse, they didn't want to do it. So it was Linda's idea to subtitle the examination as refuse division. And once we made that very clear, we actually had an increase in interest and had more people placed on the eligible list. We've also got a meeting to look at some other incentives, because these are hardworking people. I'm meeting with the Director of Operations upon his return from vacation to see how we can increase the wages for some of our technical people in the water division, and also, the refuse workers, because we realize we don't have the benchmarks anymore, because in so many areas, refuse is being outsourced. So it's difficult for us to obtain the data to see what these people really should be paid, and so therefore we want to have those kind of conversations.
Okay. Is there anything I haven't asked about you think that we should be looking at or be aware of here at the board?
I think you've hit a lot of really important points.
2-week notice.
Yeah, and Linda just reminded me, in terms of under the compensation ordinance for any employee, they're always protected by the civil service rules and also my administrative regulations. Nobody's permanent schedule can be changed without 2 weeks' notice and review and approval by the Department of Personnel.
Okay. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Alderman Gunther, any questions?
No.
Okay, Alderwoman Rice?
Jamie, my questions with you. Thank you so much, everyone,
Chair up here.
for your time. Sorry, what was it?
So we need a chair up here.
Sorry about that. So a couple of questions. I had heard some information, and I just, since we're all here together and the purpose is getting the right information here, we had heard at some point that there was a prioritization of different types of bins that were being picked up, that trash was being picked up first when we're low on trucks, we're low on drivers to take routes, however it works, that trash takes first priority, then recycling, then yard waste. Is that accurate?
I would say if you're in a situation where you have competing demands, if I have to choose between solid waste, recycle, and yard waste, just by the totals, the math just talks to me 140,000 tons of solid waste versus 20,000 respectively for recycling yard waste. I'd have to give the nod to solid waste. As far as being, if I had a competing demand and ability to send one truck out for one thing, it would probably be something like that. It's tougher to keep up with the solid waste. That's more of a volume issue than it is for some of the other things.
Okay.
In general.
Okay. And then what is the cost difference to the city for a dumpster of solid waste versus a dumpster of recycling? I think that this was something that we had talked about in my initial meetings, that we were somewhat cheaper to collect recycling, or significantly cheaper to be collecting recycling. Is that?
I'd have to ask Nick on the cost of the per at the dump. Nick, you want to come up here?
Sorry, I'm giving you your exercise for your last day here. I appreciate it.
The cost.
We are billed less for the recycled materials, although that's changing because of the China rejection of contaminated waste. But we actually save a little bit of money by recycling.
Okay, do you have any idea, ballpark, how much we save?
I would have to sit down and calculate it.
Okay, okay. I guess I'm just wondering, because if we're prioritizing different types of waste, if we're in a crisis situation, you know, what we're prioritizing, and then also what is cheaper for the city, can we be pushing our constituents more towards recycling if that's cheaper for the city and more folks are wanting to do that because that's better for the environment? Then I know that Operation Brightside and some others are working hard to get that information out there about how to do recycling well. But just trying to gather some information. Thank you. And then, Jamie, I guess another question would be: is there a system for a driver while they are out, they encounter bulk waste that is blocking the dumpster, or waste that when they pick up the dumpster falls underneath the dumpster and then things, you know, get out of whack, or the bottom of the dumpster is falling out? How do drivers let you know that there's a problem that somebody's got to come back and pick up, or do we just wait for residents to call?
No, when a driver experiences that, if it's, I guess there's several answers to that. If something that probably shouldn't have been in the dumpster is in the dumpster, and there's difficulty in raising that dumpster up because of the weight, someone dumped concrete blocks in it from a construction site, something like that, they have the inability to do it, they'll call it into their foreman, and we'll have to get someone out there to lift that up with different equipment and empty that thing out. If stuff falls off and it's something that's physically the driver is able to pick up, it's not something like a concrete block, for instance, it's something that falls out debris-wise that's ability for a normal person to pick up and throw back in, they would. If it's something that's heavier than that, or if there's debris in the way of the collection, they would call in their foreman. We'd have to get other equipment out there to assist us in that, because that's kind of out of the norm of the collection. So that we would call in support vehicles or equipment to help clear that out for our normal collections.
Okay, so if if waste has been collecting around and on top of the dumpster, and they go to pick it up, and all of this kind of falls off to the side, and they take the dumpster and they leave everything else there, that's outside of their responsibilities? If it's just bags of garbage, right? We're not talking concrete.
If we spill it, we're supposed to clean it up.
Okay.
Obviously, if people lay things against the dumpster,
Right.
pick it up, it falls on the ground.
It comes back to, right.
Instruct the drivers not to put the dumpster on top.
Okay, and they are, so if it's just bags of garbage that have fallen off, they are supposed to get out of the truck and try to clean that up on the spot, or they're supposed to call someone behind them? Because if they've got a short time window to get through all of these dumpsters, and they're also supposed to be cleaning up the mess afterwards, what's that right role there?
If it's a normal, something falls out, they would throw in the truck and go on. But if it's something like Nick was describing that's leaning against it, matches, that's a whole other bulk crew that would come in, and if it's beyond the scheduled when it should be out there, we'd have to come back out with a different crew, a bulk crew, to pick up the stuff that's outside the normal traditional trash, yard waste, and recycling.
Okay. So then on a different topic, how do you, and maybe this kind of comes to Randy as well, but how do you decide to answer the individual complaints that are coming through? So CSB gets requests. I have some residents that will call immediately and say, hey, the trash truck is normally here on Tuesday morning. It wasn't here. I'm calling immediately. Got other folks that will wait 3 weeks to call before they say, this hasn't been picked up in 3 weeks. Do you have to send a foreman out every time to investigate those, to decide how this is going to happen? Or are we collecting the data to say, oh, hey, it looks like this whole block was missed. We're going to reroute for a whole nother route? Do aldermen take preference over citizen complaints? Like, how does that work?
I think in general, an alderman would maybe bring attention to that someone has put in a complaint, but it's already in the system. It's not treated any differently. Our complaints that come in, they are filtered out. They are hard-coded to our division, and people responsible for it, and from there it fans out to the foreman as we break apart the city as far as what our coverage is. There's foremen to the drivers in their areas of the city. So those complaints, the CSB complaints come in, go through to the various foremen that are in that area. They kind of triage the situation and see what we're kind of dealing with as far as, and that's true of any city department, kind of what's the severity of the complaint here. Are we talking about an overflowing dumpster? Are we talking about there's somebody has a mattress in the alley? So really, they are the filter to kind of, with limited resources, to choose where we send folks. So if it's overflowing dumpster, maybe that's top of the list. If there's a broken lid, maybe that's not qualifies quite as much as the overflowing dumpster. Not that it won't get addressed, but it's obviously when you have to choose between one or the other, maybe you do choose for the more severe one. But I do want that noted that it's not lost in the system, that we'll never replace that lid or we'll never replace a dumpster that had a hole in it. It is still in the system, but again, we have to make the call at some point. What's the most critical action we need to take on any given day?
Sure, and that's one of the things I think that when I'm dealing with complaints that are coming in from my residents, trying to ascertain, the severity of where we're at here, right? I don't want to have to call Randy and say, hey, we've missed a block if it's just a day, right? Because pulling a driver off of a regular route then means that somebody else is waiting that extra day to get theirs as well. So trying to figure out how we can also, as we're rolling out these new routes and new schedules to try to fix the issue right now, to communicate with us so that we can communicate with our residents, or just communicate publicly, through their city website or however, to say, hey, here's what we're doing now. Here's where these routes are. Here's the days that you should be able to expect pickup, so that we're not increasing the number of complaints that are then jumbling up the system when you're trying so hard to get a schedule that works, right? So can we think of a better way to communicate that?
Oh, communicate. I was going to say, in the back of my mind as we get through, again, I'm, like I said in an earlier question, thinking in parallel to the future of how we do things. We've got the issues now and how we're dealing with them. We've kind of talked about. I mean, as we look towards the future and keeping our trucks up, but we'd also like to maybe take a fresh approach at maybe re-optimizing our routes, taking a look at where the volume is. We've got that historical data, that tonnage that's prepared every day and every month and every year to look at, and then some of the geographic things we've talked about, the distance on some of these routes. There's a lot of things that go into setting these routes and designing these routes to provide those type of services. So it's been a while since we've looked at it. Nick's already been looking at some re-optimizing, and I think that's something once we get out of the woods to say, with the situation we're dealing with now, to take a fresh approach and re-optimize these routes. And maybe it's more, maybe it's less, maybe we do this, maybe we do that. But again, take that fresh approach and a very intelligent, educated approach as far as how we do this. and see if anything's changed. Maybe we end up and we find out that what we have now is actually the best case, the best design for the city, but I think it's prudent to take a look at that and verify after so many years that it is the right approach and things haven't changed as much, or they have, and we should act accordingly after that.
Yeah, always basing on data is a great way to go there. So if you are switching again the way that the schedule is going to work, there was a memo that came, I believe, from the mayor's office early on in the spring that said, hey, we're going to extend hours. Here's how pickup is going to work over the summer to try to account for that. And that was really helpful information. If we can get that same type of memo that says, here's, your normal Monday and Tuesday routes are going to shift a little bit, or here's the extended hours that folks can expect, then that allows us to be able to communicate to our constituents, the schedule has changed. It's not the same as it was 2 years ago. Here's what we're doing now. That would help us advocate for you as well and for our constituents to kind of try to meet that.
I agree 100%. So we'll summarize that 2-shift plan for you guys so that you're able to properly inform both yourselves and your constituents. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks. That would be greatly appreciated. And my last one is kind of a comment about CSB and the way that those requests are closed, because all we get right now is just that the request has been closed. There's no information given about, this was forwarded, this is when we should expect a response, or just says we can expect a response by refuse on such and such date. And then it'll just say it's closed, right? It seems to be room in there to say scheduled for next pickup, or whatever the issue is, right? Or closed because it's a duplicate request, right? Because that happens as well.
Sure.
But just closing it out doesn't do anybody any good. And so I think that's where there's just not information coming back to the constituents when they're reporting it.
Yeah, I'm curious from the earlier comment and yours as well, being on my side where you fill it out, is my understanding, and I have to, again, look at this from maybe I'd have to see someone's complaint, a copy of what they're actually receiving on the user end.
Yeah.
My understanding is we have the public resolution code, so the only way we as a city worker can close that out is to pick that code, and then the close button or save and close buttons work for us. So it's not, I can't just go close it and it's gone. I have to pick something to close it. But again, my understanding is that public resolution, while it's in shorthand, to me it may say work completed, but in reality there's actually a longer sentence that it was short for that goes to the public. So it's a public resolution. The public should be seeing this resolution in sentence format of what we said, like the Ameren issue. I said it. I think there's and I just remember these from the traffic division where I think it says, or a MoDOT signal. Someone may file a complaint about a MoDOT signal. In my shorthand public resolution on the city worker side, I would click the MoDOT button, click save. But on the public side, they actually see a sentence that says, this signal is under the responsibility of operation by MoDOT. Your comment has been sent to them, type thing, in long sentence format. That should be on the user end, what they're seeing. And I use that traffic example for the other ones, but I'm absolutely, let's look at what's going on from that, because that's not helping us at all if they're not seeing any
And maybe that's just
format. So
a technology translation issue that we're just getting the closed, because it's good to know that that's going into the system. That's just not getting outputted to the public.
Right, and then even in the system, they should, with that reference number they have, the CSB number, even when it's been closed out, I can pull, I just did this morning, pulled up one, and it should say what the resolution was on it. So I'll look into that, because now you've got, between the earlier comment and that one, you've got my interest up on that for sure.
Okay, and just real quick, Nick, does this sound right? So that a solid waste bin would be $34.94, recycling would be $16.04, and yard waste would be $26.80 per bin?
That's close. I do have the actual figures.
Got the actual figures. Okay. I just think it'd be good to get that kind of on record for the public too, so that we know as we're going forward here. Go ahead.
I'll give it to you after the meeting.
Okay, that'd be great. I've got folks that are wanting to switch out solid waste for recycling because they're trying to go that direction, and so that's helpful for us all to know that that's cheaper for us to be doing as residents as well. So, thank you so much. That's all the questions I've got.
Thank you.
Okay. On that note, we do have Ms. Dottie McDowell here, and we'll have her come up now, and she can kind of talk us through how that CSB complaint goes in and what comes out on the other end. So Dottie is the, correct me if I'm wrong, Dottie, Director of Citizen Service Bureau / Neighborhood Improvement?
Yes, good morning, Chairman and committee.
So you've heard a little bit, Alderman Wright's conversation with the Director of Streets. So constituents say there's a trash problem, they put the request in, and what comes back is completed, but it's not complete. So kind of walk us through from the time that person either calls, send a tweet or an email, what's happening, how does it come out at the other end, who's responsible for what?
Okay, I will walk you through the life cycle of the service request. So from the time a citizen contacts the Citizen Service Bureau, that can be via telephone, via Twitter. They can initiate the request themselves online. However, it still comes to the Citizen Service Bureau for a review before getting passed on to the operating department. They can live chat with us, or they can walk in face-to-face. After listening to their concern, the customer service representative decides the most appropriate problem code and way to identify the issue. There's sometimes a series of questions and answers that we ask the caller so that we can provide as much detail as possible for the operating department who will be receiving the request. Once the request is saved, it's assigned a unique identifying number, and that's a service request number, and that number is used to track the status of the request from initiation through completion. As soon as this request is saved, on the back end within the CityWorks system, that's a system that we use for entering all of the service requests, it automatically is submitted to the operating department. From there, the operating department can dispatch it to an employee within their division to begin the investigation and resolution. Within CityWorks, there are several status types that can be programmed. In this case, I understand that the one of most concerned is the status that reflects closed, when in fact, there's still work to be completed. And depending upon the operating department, it could mean that the work has actually been completed and there's no longer an issue. And in some cases, closed just simply is the date and time that the request was closed and automatically stamped based upon when the employee in that operating department closed the request. And that is actually what's listed on the city's public data sets website. So there is a site called Open Data that the City of St. Louis has, and it has several data sets, including service request data that's captured by the Citizen Service Bureau, and the description for the date and time closed from that site reads, date/time the request was closed, parentheses, auto-stamped based on when the employee closed the request, close parentheses. That, as I know all too well, is very frustrating for citizens because when they see the term closed, they expect that the issue has been resolved. And in some cases, it has not been. But there are various statuses that can be programmed into CityWorks based upon the needs of the operating department that could provide more meaningful updates as to the actual status of what's going on.
Could you give us some examples of those?
It could be, waiting on parts,
Okay.
or will be collected by, next date or a week from now. So it's really up to the programmers, and we have the discretion of programming what the departments need. And actually, it wouldn't be me programming it, but our IT department.
Thank you.
Okay, let me make sure I'm clear, and then we'll just take questions from the rest of the committee members. So, close does not have to really mean problem solved.
That's correct.
So how do we fix that?
My recommendation would be to add additional statuses from the time that the request was initiated through the time that it's actually resolved. So if that means that, we're waiting on a part, then programming language in there to reflect that, or that it's been dispatched to the foreman, and the foreman will contact the citizen within 5 days, or whatever that may look like for the specific operating department. I don't want to speak to what their needs are, but we can certainly identify some common responses and utilize those.
And who would own that to make that change?
Well, the change would be driven by the operating department and then work in collaboration with the information technology programmers to get those status updates in CityWorks. And the operating departments actually select the status and make the updates. So once the customer service rep hangs up with the caller and saves that request, it's kind of out of the Citizen Service Bureau's hands unless the caller calls back and inquires about an update or calls to provide additional information.
Okay. Stand right there. I'm going to call Zachary up to the microphone. I know he's surprised and I'm calling him, but I'm calling him because I know he's a guy that goes out into the field and does inspections on behalf of the street department as it relates to sidewalks. So tell us your position, Zach.
First of all, thank you for having me. My name's Zach Fortune, and I'm a labor foreman 1 for the street department, director's office.
Okay, so do you get information from Citizen Service Bureau if a constituent called about a busted sidewalk or a pothole?
Absolutely, on a daily basis.
So how do you handle that?
If the caller's information is there, I will personally contact them and update them on what our procedure is and the process.
Okay. Okay. Someone asked me to step forward to the microphone, Zach.
Sorry.
Okay, so let's suppose you can't get a hold of a person on the telephone. So what are you doing in the system? How do you update the Citizen Service Bureau service request number so that constituent, if they want to log back in and find out the status?
In the system, I would put in there, say we have an asphalt pothole. There's an add comment box. I would add in there, sent to street maintenance for repair. In my closed or in my public resolution, I would put work in progress, and then I would close the service request out. But additionally, I could also create a work order off of that service request, and that would be generated and go to street maintenance.
So when you do a work in progress, do you give them an estimated date of completion, or it just lingers out there?
Do not. And that's something that the citizen, if I can't reach them, they can contact Citizen Service Bureau, and then your technician would let them know what my comments said, my additional comments in the add comment box.
So,
Are those online?
Wait, hold on. So the additional comments that the operating department puts in there can only be seen by Citizen Service Bureau?
Correct.
Okay. And so the citizen is still in limbo then. We don't know what's going on. We don't know if it's going to be a month. I mean, what if it's parts on order or something? I mean, how do we provide a better service? How do we, communicate that better?
Okay, so
Wait a minute, Zach. Go ahead, Dottie.
So with the different statuses, that's what publicly gets communicated back out to citizens. There are various notes and comments that can be entered by CityWorks users, so it could be by Zach or myself, and those are more so internal comments, but the status is what the citizen sees on the back end and what they would see when they check the status of their request online. So they see the status and they can see the public resolution, but not all service request codes have public resolutions.
Okay, so going back to what Zach said, though, so if let's say he said they were working on it, and maybe they're working on it means that they're ordering a part or they're waiting on asphalt to come in or something. The citizen cannot see that, correct?
That's correct.
And the citizens have no idea when that product may come in or part, right?
That's correct.
But the citizen can call you, and then you would drill down and find out what's going on, then you would tell them via telephone or email or whatever?
We could tell them via telephone if they call in, but I think the most meaningful way to address it would be to add more codes for the status and public resolutions, because those are things that are easily identifiable if the citizen were to go on the city's website without making an additional call and having to sometimes wait on hold for a customer service representative. And again, the status updates, those are driven by the individual operating departments and entered by them.
So now, I see with Zach, so let's say the asphalt comes in or whatever, so you can go out and do what you need to do.
Okay.
Are you saying, and let's say it's done today, so at the end of the day, you just say closed, or and will they see it online that it's actually, the problem is fixed? I mean.
No, they won't. They will just see that it is closed and work in progress. They only see the public resolution.
Okay.
Which I placed, and that's work completed or work in progress for an asphalt. Other things like 50/50 sidewalk program, it would say added to the program.
Okay.
And situations like that, or your sewer lateral repairs, we try to make contact with that citizen just to update them, because that's a major construction project that's going to take place in front of their residents, and it's best to be in touch with them.
Okay. All right, thank you, Zach.
Welcome.
Jamie, you want to chime in?
Yeah, yes, Chairman, you kind of reminded me, or Dottie did as she was describing that process. So for each thing in the city that could go wrong, there's a number of problem codes, and that problem codes, that's debris and alley, street light, blah, blah, blah. And then there's the public resolutions that go with them, asphalts, parts on order, all this kind of stuff, are answers to those. We went through at the street department, I believe it was in the beginning of 2017, end of 2016, a visit from CSB and a rehash of what problem codes we had identified. Some were historically, we'd add ones in, and some would almost become a little redundant, maybe not as descriptive for folks. When we hear from the residents, I really can't tell which type of problem. I know what my problem is. I don't know what's the best one to pick, because it doesn't quite sound like mine. So we had a session with them to review what we had both from our problem codes, the most common things that pop up, and then as also on the other side, the public resolution, the part they do see when it's closed. They do see what is labeled as Dottie said, the public resolution part. And I think maybe as we rehash that and we got our answers to those, the problem resolutions, maybe we'd take another look and see if it can be a little more descriptive on those. So there is a little more information going to the public. The challenge here that Dottie referenced was you want to avoid having, you don't have the ability to write anything you want in there, because I don't know if that's as efficient for use of our time, but then it's also not as efficient to have a million different resolutions to pick from. Part may be on order for 15 days, 25 days. So you don't want to get too much, so it's that balance of striking that balance of enough information but not too much. So it's been a couple years since we looked at it. Maybe we should take a look back at what we have, see if it can be a little more descriptive on our things. So maybe it just doesn't say work in progress. Maybe it has a little ending that, a little more description of what that work is and what the residents can expect.
So you think if we could, like Twitter, limit it to a certain amount of characters, that would help?
There probably is a limit on the characters. I don't know how close we are in some of our descriptions offhand. I don't want to speak for Dottie, but I think there's probably a chance where we can do some editing or see what flexibility we have with characters to expand that to be both informative and not overdoing it with details. Okay,
can you tell us who in your operating agency, when a person has an issue with trash and they put through CSB and it ends up closed, who's doing that?
Some of our foremen would go in and close those out.
But it's not closed. It's not abated. The problem's not solved.
I'd have to see exactly which one, but I mean, to close it, I mean, Dottie, I'm correct, you need to pick a public resolution to close it. So I don't know what's been chosen. If it's work completed, that would imply that the situation's been resolved, or if it's in the queue to whatever the public resolution code is for that, they have to pick that to close it. So I'd have to see what it is. I don't know, maybe if it's work completed and they're actively on the route, it's going to be finished by the end of the day because it's in someone's queue to do for that day. I don't know the exact circumstance for that.
Okay.
But in general, they should not be closed out without the work being completed, or at least investigated. I should know sometimes when things are brought up, what someone sees may not necessarily be what's wrong. It can be investigated when there's a public resolution that says no problem found. Maybe get a little more description of that, what it is, but you can have a situation where someone says they wait too long on a side street for a traffic signal, but we go out and look, everything's working and the timing is appropriate for the volumes, all that kind of stuff. So in our minds, there actually is no problem found. It doesn't mean someone complains and we just go add more time.
Right, the big, thing, it seems to be when it says close, and we want to try to get to the bottom of why it's being closed. I know Pam wanted to say something, I'm not sure what, Pam Keeling, did you want to make a comment about something that was brought up? Pam is the supply commissioner.
Hi, I'm Pam Keeling. I just wanted to let somebody know, I just wanted to let somebody know that I sent an email to Cindy Reardon, who's the director of IT, and she's the person who did most of the programming and overseeing for the CSB. So I sent her a note asking if it would be possible to add that column of reasoning to your reports so that you could see it.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go ahead and have the committee ask Dottie some more questions, and then after that, we're going to go to the public so we can start to wrap up the hearing, and if you don't mind.
Sure. All right, go down here. Alderwoman Murphy?
No questions, thank you.
All right, now I guess it's on me now. Dottie, thanks for being here. I guess I have a little bit better understanding of this, and I think the problem maybe does lie with how departments are coding some of these requests, so I appreciate you coming down and talking to us about this. I know it was brought up last night, there's certainly frustration from the public who, don't have access to those back-end notes and don't necessarily want to, if they're doing their part as a citizen and going online and putting in a service request, I don't think they shouldn't have to then pick up the phone and call to find out information about what's the status of that request. So whatever sort of forward-facing information we're putting out there, we maybe need to look at. I'm actually about to put in a request now. I'm not going to tell you which one, just to track it and see how it goes, and when it gets resolved. But so thank you for being here. And it's that closed one that I think is particularly troubling to everybody because we just have no clue what closed means, and it's very frustrating. With that, I'll just quit babbling, and we'll go to Alderwoman Boyd. Is she still here? No? Okay. Alderman Bosley.
Thank you. Once again, thank you for being here, Ms. Dottie. Really appreciate you. So with I guess we working towards being solution oriented. So just so I can understand, what we want to take from the hearing is we're going to work to try to just put an extra, section in there for when there's a response from one department to another. It's not a closed request. It's just, would it be us getting more information to the citizen who put in the request saying, if they're waiting on parts, we'll say forestry's waiting on parts, or we're waiting on a response from parks. We'll have, we're waiting on a response from parks. Is that what, I guess the goal would be moving forward to try to add that tab to kind of cut down on some of the confusion moving forward?
I think that the public would appreciate, most of all, a greater sense of transparency. And we do have the capability to share more details. And as we mentioned earlier, some of the notes are internal between the departments. But if it's something that, this committee feels that would be most helpful and more meaningful to allow citizens to read more details, that could certainly be something that's turned on. We can also go through the historical data that we have based on the various problem codes and work with the operating departments to determine some general status updates that would provide, some detailed information between the date that the service request was actually initiated and the date that it was closed. And not all service request codes right now have a public resolution tied to them, so we could also strengthen our communication and the messaging to the public by ensuring that there are public resolutions for all service request codes and meaningful statuses along the way from the time that it's open to the time that it's truly closed and resolved. So those would be my recommendations.
Understood. Do you think it would be helpful, and we have our NSIs, would it be helpful to have them kind of be those individuals who make sure that, because I know they drive around also, to make sure that these requests are being closed or following up behind them, and maybe reach out to the citizens after they've been closed. Of course, we do that at the same time, but as you know, there's a lot of babble that goes along in the city. Everybody's mad at somebody for something. That's just kind of what's going on. Every citizen can be angry at some department for one reason or another. And sometimes we even in the board of Alderman, you hear talk about how people feel like this department isn't helpful or that department isn't helpful. I would, think that every department has at some point in time before it was created so it could be as helpful as possible. So sometimes we aren't, once again as a city moving or running as adequately as we used to, so services seem a little off. But like you said, transparency is important. Is there any way you think that could be something that we could do towards working in the future and having the NSIs a little bit more, just communicating more with the individuals who are putting in these requests, because that is one of the reasons they kind of get paid to be our liaison between the communities and these different departments and issues.
Yes, I think that would be really helpful, and one of the things that happens with some neighborhood groups, the neighborhood stabilization team, specifically the neighborhood improvement specialist, provides a report out to that group of concerned residents about the service requests that have been received for a specific area and the current status. And in going through those reports, sometimes the group of concerned citizens will narrow in on a couple of things that haven't been resolved right away or that may take a little bit longer. And so we do continue that dialogue and track those issues through completion by providing status updates to the neighborhood groups. And sometimes we do that for individuals as well. So we wouldn't be able to do that for every single request, but certainly we do it for some and are more than happy to reach out and to fulfill those needs.
Understood. Now, I know we get a lot of them, so of course it's hard to address every person, but I think given kind of the state of the city and with everybody feeling like they're not getting anything and then vocalizing that, and then you hear those stigmas out across the city, it continually makes it a place where people don't want to be. So I think the more we work on making sure we don't have people out kind of promoting that the city is kind of falling or failing, I think every department we all need to do better with, communication. But I certainly appreciate everything you all do. So, if that's, I get the reports also. So if that's something we can look towards, I would at least love to, at least our seniors, because sometimes they can worry themselves about, a lot, and when they see that it's closed or they don't feel like they're being listened to, it's so if we can.
Happy to reach out.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Alderwoman Martin.
Hello, thank you for coming.
Hi.
Okay, so I think this is something that maybe has kind of gotten out of hand, but I don't think it's anything we can't collectively resolve here, and I don't think anyone's nefarious about it. But like everyone else, I'm having issues. I have some forestry requests that have been repeatedly closed out since 2015. So years where, these issues aren't getting resolved, and then they're being told that they are, or given an excuse. So one thing I know that's happening, and I have talked to Mr. Walterman about this, but with the trash issue, a lot of times people, the call to CSB needs to get referred to the trash task force, and I know that there's a disconnect there. And either it's getting pawned off as a refuge driver issue, when really it's like an illegal dumping issue, needs to get investigated and needs to get cleaned up. I have great luck with the trash task force, so I feel like if CSB would just send, those complaints over, then everyone would be much happier, it would get resolved quickly. So that's just one suggestion I have.
Well, the Trash Task Force actually does receive Citizen Service Bureau requests. They receive them in the same manner that other operating departments receive them. As soon as they're saved and the codes that are programmed to get submitted to the Trash Task Force, Sergeant Joe Calabro and his team receive those. Now, it sounds like perhaps there are some issues that perhaps weren't coded for the Trash Task Force, and maybe we can identify a better way of addressing that. But when that happens, if there's a service request that perhaps goes to a division of refuse, but once the refuse department receives it and they see that it's more suited for the Trash Task Force, then they can refer it and redirect it to the Trash Task Force. So I'm not really certain what the disconnect is, but I would be more than happy to take a look at that. But there's nothing that should prevent the Trash Task Force from receiving a service request that should be submitted to them.
I mean, I have heard whether it's forestry or refuse or wherever, or the Trash Task Force, I get, and, I'll just, somebody will say, I put in a complaint with CSB, it got closed out, nothing happened. So then I just go directly to the source with the department, it gets resolved right away, and then I hear, well, that was actually never sent. I hear disconnects all over the city, like the street sweepers can't get through or I call and I say, well, can we send a street sweeper over there? Oh no, we haven't been doing that in 10 years because forestry never trimmed the trees. Well, it's like, why didn't you call forestry? So I'm digressing a little bit, but there's just constant breakdowns of communication here, and that's an accountability issue. I do have a lot of complaints from constituents that when they call CSB, they get a very rude response.
Well, thank you for bringing that to my attention, and whenever that happens, I like to know right away, because I do have the ability to listen in on those calls and to find those calls. So as long as I know the date, time, and a service request number or the representative's name, I can address that immediately.
Okay, thank you.
Because our citizens are our top priority, and no one should be being rude to them.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And then another issue that I guess I have more comments than questions, but another issue is that some of the assistants, our assistants here at the Board of Aldermen, they're getting calls from constituents where they call CSB, and CSB says, well, that's an alderman issue. You need to call your alderman.
With those, I would like to know specifically what those issues are, so that I can address them, but without having the specifics, I unfortunately can't.
I do think I'll admit that that's a failure on my part as well. Like, I should have been following up with you and saying, hey, here's the issue, in conjunction with following up with the department. But my biggest issue is, like everyone else, is the closed out cases. We've got to figure out a resolution and not keep passing it around and saying, well, it was this person or that person or this department or that department, because, like I said, I've got some from 2015. The tree trimming, it just seems to be and I know that's not what we're here for today, but that seems to be the biggest issue. And whether it's adding another field on the website or the database, whatever, this just seems like something we could solve pretty quickly. So
I agree, and I'm happy to sit down with you and go through the historic data, because there are some that are entered year after year for the same issue, and I would love to work towards a better resolution for our citizens. So I would love to sit with you and go through the data. Last week, I believe it was, or either the week before, I sent Alderwoman Ingracia and Alderwoman Spencer some extensive data in relation to the refuse service request over the past couple of years, inclusive of even to include a map that showed the clusters of where the most service requests were entered. And so if that's something that you would like to work through for your area or any of you, I'm more than happy to work with you.
Great, thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Alderman Gunther, do you have any questions?
Thank you for being here. Just really quick, because this kind of ties on to some of the other things, but some of the discussion today is about staffing. So my question to you is, where are we on staffing? Because I know that my NSO, who's supposed to be out in the field dealing with the refuse issues and the problem properties and stuff like that, I know that she's been spending 2 days a week answering telephones for CSB. So are we down?
Well, yes. Actually, since both the Citizen Service Bureau and the Neighborhood Stabilization Division fall up under the same umbrella, we've taken an all-hands-on-deck team approach for helping to resolve some of the calls that we have in queue. We've had a higher-than-usual call time in the Citizen Service Bureau. In the month of July alone, we've experienced a 29% increase in call volume, and even I take a turn and a shift for answering the calls within the Citizen Service Bureau. It's unfair to say that any one neighborhood improvement specialist is answering the phones consistently every week, but they have been assigned phone duties on a rotational basis. We recently hired, I think it was last week or the week before last, 2 full-time customer service representatives and 1 limited-term seasonal customer service representative for the call center. They are in training now, and I anticipate that they will be up and running and able to answer calls on their own within about 3 weeks.
Okay, so we just hired 2 new people and 1 part-time that will be taking over that duty so that our NSOs can get back in the streets.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
we'll be
and then-
hiring a couple of new neighborhood improvement specialists as well, because
Okay.
we've been short in that area.
Yeah, and I think I'm just not going to go too long, but just kind of echoing some of the stuff. So, I mean, I'm looking through like my call logs here, and here's a person that last week said, I've been calling CSB since the beginning of June, haven't got a resolution, filing a complaint with CSB for 2 months, nothing happened, called CSB and did not get a chance to speak to anyone. I was on hold for over 25 minutes. So, like, these are the messages I'm getting.
Yes.
So then,
And that would be, again, we've had a 29% increase in call volume with the same number of seats and staffing in the center. We have 8 seats.
Yeah.
And each year, my staff answers approximately 110,000 calls. And so to have a 29% increase in the month of July, it forced us to put neighborhood improvement specialists on the phones to alleviate some of that call volume.
well, hopefully the calls will start going down when the trash starts getting running right and forestry starts mowing lots, and so
Yes.
hopefully the calls will drop.
So we hope so. But to address your point of your constituents saying that they've contacted CSB and there's no response, again, the Citizen Service Bureau and the customer service reps, they are the liaisons for between the citizens and the operating department. So once that request is saved, it's in the hands of the operating department for response and investigation and resolution. And if you have specifics, I can speak to those individually.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Alderwoman Rice. Okay. Dottie, I'm glad to hear you say that you're 20% up, because I did hear from quite a few of my constituents. I say call CSB this summer. They were frustrated and said they were on hold for a long time. So that I understand now better what's going on. I appreciate you working with your staff to put an all hands on deck. That is what we should do, because it's about providing the best quality service that we can to our constituents. It's a problem that can easily be solved. I think some of the stuff I've heard today, and we're going to see if we can't work on that. So thank you so much for being here, but don't leave.
Okay.
We're going to hear
Thank
from
you.
the public, and I want to thank them for their patience. We have about 4 people.
Okay.
The first person is Albert Hilliard. And tell us where you live, and if you're representing somebody, say that.
Name's Albert Hilliard. Live at 3924 San Francisco Court in Sharon Tyus Ward. employee of the City of St. Louis, trash operator. I would just like to personally thank you guys for taking this time to hear our voice as drivers, because we feel like it's been overdue for you guys to know what's really going on in our department. I'm not here to throw anybody under the bus, but we have a problem in our city and we're failing. And as a driver, I've always taken pride in my job. I love my job. I came from driving over the road making twice as much money as I make now, not for the money, but to clean up the city that, as a youngster, I was a part of destroying. That's what I put on my application. I wanted to come back and give back to the community that I helped destroy. And we just feel as drivers that this is not management's problem, it's not our problem, it's not you guys' problem, it's not the mayor's problem. This is a collective problem that we need to come together as one unit to solve. We as drivers, we've suggested to management different things that could work. They come up with their own ideas. We are part of the team. We do the work. We're on the ground level. We see what trucks, I have two other fellow drivers in there. We know every truck in this fleet. We know what every truck is capable of. So we know from the ground level what can be done with what we have, what can be done in a certain time limit. Yes, we have a truck problem. Yes, we're underpaid. Yes, certain areas get special privileges. St. Louis Hills never's gonna have this problem. Holly Hills, Compton Heights, that's not the issue. We are failing our city and our department, and we are here to voice our concern also as the people who are out there on the ground level doing the work to try to correct this problem. And I'd just like to personally thank you guys for this day has been too long coming. There's no more time for partial truth, for putting the issues on the table. We are so, me personally, I am honored to be standing in front of you guys so everyone knows, the customers knows, the aldermen know, the mayor know that we're doing our job. We love our job, and I do it with the utmost passion. You know, any questions that you guys have for me, I would love to answer. I'm a man of integrity. I'll be answered with all honesty. And I'm not going to hold you guys up. I have a logistics man over here. He's going to take plenty of you guys' time, but I just want to let you guys know that as a driver, we take pride in what we do. And we're here to do whatever we can to help resolve the problem.
Ever, how long have you been a driver with the city?
I've been a driver for the city for 5.5 years.
5.5 years, okay. I don't know if we need to take many questions from, I think we just hear testimony.
Okay.
So I appreciate you. Thank you so much, and thank you for being committed. Okay, next person is, look like Eric Wisner. Oh, boy.
I guess I'm the logistics guy.
I remember Eric. Let me tell you guys something. Eric doesn't bite his tongue. He says what's on his mind. So be nice to us, Eric.
I will try, and thank you all for having us here today. First and foremost, we at the Refuse Division are completely demoralized. As he said, we have brought idea after idea after idea, not only to our people, but to some of the people sitting here today and other aldermen and women, and it falls on deaf ears. I express 5 rules at work, and rule number 4 and rule number 5 are don't create work for anybody and don't outshine anybody who outranks you, because if it creates work for somebody, or if somebody can't take credit or benefit for it, it's not going to happen. But my better half was frustrated from April to July 7th, waking her up at 2:30 in the morning to go to work. Now, after a 3-week break, she's off every Saturday. Now I'm going to have to work. We're working 10, 12, 13, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. This year, the first time in my history with the Refuse Division, we worked on holidays. I worked on Christmas Eve. I also worked on New Year's Day. We've worked on Sundays. They've taken. We're underpaid. Everybody knows it. The Director of Personnel raised the recruiting wage 10%, to bring us to the bottom of the nation. They didn't give us a dime, and as you know, I was highly active in making that happen in the first place. We want to be treated with civility and respect and paid what we're worth. You can obviously see right now, we're doing everything we can just to make sure everybody gets a single collection a week. Single collection will not work. This is the result of trying to have single collection in our areas. You guys have covered so many things today. I'm highly impressed and would be happy to answer any of the questions you've put on the board. But I would like to, if I may, a sewage one that he asked specifically with routes. As far as the routes go with considerations, they need to be based on time first and foremost. But when you consider, we previously had separate locations, now we're in a central location. So the farther out you go, obviously, the longer it takes to get there. In the case of north routes, we may have sporadic cans, but we still have to go through the alleys to collect them. And if you've been through the north alleys, you're driving through a jungle. You can't just drive through. You have to go slow so you don't destroy the mirrors and the windows on the truck and the potholes, what have you. It's atrocious, and you've mentioned that about forestry not taking care of business. I mean, for us to drive through a jungle just to try and go collect a route is ridiculous. The routes on north may have less weight. There may be some disparity between north and south in general, but it takes a lot longer to cover that territory than it does to drive up and down 5 alleys and collect a ton of trash. So there's a conversation there. There is a tremendous disparity in the routes themselves. Some of them, one driver, one truck may be able to go out and run in 4.5, 5 hours on a Thursday where he only has to pick up, light trash and yard waste. On Monday, Tuesday, it may be, 8.5, 9 hours. There are other routes where that same situation, same driver, same truck, it would take twice as long. The routes are based on weights, not time, so that I personally have an issue with and have been trying to get rectified for a decade plus. We have no sensibility, accountability, or efficiency in the division at this point in time. We've got changes coming from what I understand, so I'm hopeful.
Okay, Eric, let me ask you this. So a route that's 4.5 hours, and it's a 10-hour day. So what does the driver do for the other 5.5 hours?
Well, traditionally, that we would volunteer and go out and run additional. Now it's mandatory that we go out and run additional. But you have to understand that route on a Monday or a Tuesday may take 9 hours to run through, because first and foremost, you have additional trash out there. Secondly, on Monday and Tuesdays, we're running recycle, and it's a lot harder to put recycle on a truck than it is solid waste or yard waste.
Okay, so let me ask you this, though. So is that particular driver that may get a 4.5-hour route today and a 9-hour route another day is basically still 40 hours that week?
Yes.
Okay. And let me ask you this, because this is one of the most frustrating things for me as an alderman with drivers, and I really appreciate our drivers. How often do you think a driver actually report debris in the alley where they cannot get in, they just drive in and back out and not call anybody, so the alley is obstructed? How often do you think, generate work orders?
How often would we do that and not report it?
No, how often do you report it?
Oh, daily.
Do you?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Not only do we have radios in the truck, most of us have the bulk foreman's phone numbers, so we can call them directly to deal with an issue. And very often, the foreman will come over. We have two really good bulk foremen. That's Dave Boise and Roger. They will come over and investigate the situation, bring a truck there as quickly as possible. But I don't think we have a circumstance where if somebody can't get through an alley that they're not reporting it, at least putting it on their card and notifying their foreman, if not the bulk foreman.
What about holes in dumpsters or no lids on dumpsters? Are those being reported?
I can speak for myself personally. Anytime that the caps come off to where I know the lid is going to come off, I report that. The holes, to be honest with you, it depends on whether or not the container is going to continue to hold trash. If it's not dumping trash on the ground that the container is going to end up sitting on top of, which not only makes it a danger, but it makes it a lot more unlikely to be safely collected, I would report it. A hole in it to where some water can seep out, something like that, even if you can see daylight through it, would I report it? No.
Okay. So walk us through when you report, let's use because this seems to be a big issue in my ward. So it's a big old hole in the trash can. Trash is obviously and drivers have sometimes still pick it up because people are going to still put trash in it.
Exactly.
So when a driver, tell me about the reporting process when you call that in. Just using that one example, what happens?
We have a daily trip card. We would do two things. Number one, since trash is coming out, that's going to create an issue with the trash can sitting on top of the trash.
Exactly.
Which may make it tip over. It also becomes a health issue because it's accumulating. We would call the foreman of the route or whoever's covering that route the day on the radio, let them know, and we would also put it on our driver's trip ticket so that they can record it from their proper location at the end of the day. Then they do a hand ticket to our maintenance division, who would go out, replace the can, repair the can, whatever's necessary.
Okay.
And
is that system working in your mind?
no.
Okay.
Well, primary reason it's not working is because by the time they get out there, the can's going to be overloaded, which means we need a piece of equipment to lift it, which we have a bent arm crane. It's a flatbed truck that has a bending arm crane between the cab and the bed.
Mm-hmm.
It's down 60% of the time. They don't have the equipment to work with.
Okay, so that explains that. Did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, I can wait.
Okay, I'm done.
Hey, Eric, how are you?
Good, Jack.
Thanks for being here. And this may have been covered earlier, but you brought it up at the beginning, the routes. Do we know, when's the last time the routes were analyzed and, I guess, have they been adjusted in the last decade?
There has been a couple changes to 3 or 4 routes in the 17 years that I've been there.
Okay, but for the most part, the routes have remained the same,
Correct.
despite the fact that population in the city has shifted dramatically.
Correct.
Okay, well, that's probably something that needs to get looked at. Mr. Frank earlier was talking about, I guess, the lack of a contract for the refuse drivers, and the city and this MOU and some issues with AFSCME. Can you comment on some of that? What's going on? I mean, who is, you guys, I was always understanding AFSCME represented the refuse drivers.
They do. As a matter of fact, the gentleman that he mentioned is Ben Harmon. He was our staff rep here locally, formerly the chief of staff of Missouri, Kansas, for Iowa Council 61. They dissolved Council 72, which was Jefferson City, and merged us with Iowa. So Iowa, Missouri, and Kansas are now all one council out of Des Moines, Iowa. He was the staff rep. He was not the administrator, as the director stated. The administrator is actually present and has been for 3.5 years, something along those lines. He's an international representative. He is the administrator of Local 410. And we also have an international representative present right now, Joseph Clark, that has been sent in to replace Ben. He had to leave the union due to health issues.
Okay. And so, but you guys currently don't have do you have a contract with the city?
They say we don't.
Okay.
I personally was on the MOU committee, negotiated the current MOU that was supposed to be in effect. Due to some truck assignment issues that came up in committee recently, the director of personnel said that even though he had people present when we negotiated it, and I believe he signed it, he said that because it didn't come before the Board of Aldermen that it was negated. So I guess we don't currently have an MOU.
Okay. We should certainly look into some of that because, I mean, I think we could probably address some of the issues, the grievances the drivers had through getting a contract in place, right? Okay. One of the issues you mentioned was, obviously when you're going through an alley, you've got all sorts of problems. You've got tree limbs, other things. Does forestry, and I know you guys will report issues with, trash can, with dumpsters and things. Do you guys report, while you're out on your route, if there's a big old, sinkhole or something in an alley, do you guys report that somehow?
Absolutely.
And that goes on that log form that you turn in every day? Where does that go?
We do put that on the daily trick ticket as well, but in the case of something like that where it's impassable or it's a danger, we call it in and they notify the street department immediately. Generally, as a rule, an inspector will come out, at least put cones on it, and try and identify the problem.
All right, and does that system work? I mean, when you're putting those requests in, I mean, I'm not expecting everything to get fixed immediately, but are those things getting relayed to the streets department, in your opinion?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. And thank you for doing that, because you guys are out there every day, sort of our first line, eyes and ears in a lot of these alleys. Talk to me about you spend a couple minutes talking about issues with dumpsters when they get overflowed and they're broken and you got to bring in this crane. How many of these things do we have? Do we have just the one, the crane that picks up the broken dumpsters?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay.
Other than that, it's a man crew with a tailgate lift truck trying to wrestle it, tip it over. It's bad. It's a recipe for disaster.
How many, and so that would take multiple people, obviously, if you have to go out there manually.
If it's a really overloaded one, it may take 6 guys just to move it if the tailgate's capable of putting it on a truck to take it in there. And then they have to tip it off the truck in the transfer station. Yeah, it's just not feasible.
Okay. What would you say, what percentage of your work week do you spend riding your route versus, dealing with, I guess, specialized individual issues, whether it's overloading or illegal dumping?
As an operator, my only task is to collect the cans.
Okay.
Are you speaking operationally wise for the other people in our division?
Yeah, well, so I wasn't, so if you just drive, you don't have to get out and deal with the if there's a overloaded dumpster.
Right, that would be the maintenance.
The maintenance guys come out and do that, okay.
And they have their own equipment, their own supervision, separate employees.
Got it. Thank you, that's very helpful.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. Be in contact with you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is Larry Hillbolt. Yes.
Thank you, very kind. I've heard all the complaints, bad equipment.
Mr. Hillbolt, tell us.
I represent myself. I live in St. Louis City.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I've heard all the complaints about the equipment, trash not getting picked up. Okay, here's my question. Can somebody tell me why you are in the trash business? Why are we in the trash business? We don't hear these issues in St. Louis County, St. Charles County, Frontenac. Why are we in this issue? Somebody tell me?
I can tell you my first thought,
Okay.
because we've always been in the trash business, so.
It's bad. It's not working. You're really not in the trash business. None of us are trash experts.
Well, what we're in is
Problems.
service. We're in the service business.
Okay, but you're not completing that service.
But what I hear is we need to do a better job of what we're doing. Now, certainly there are other options, right? We can get out of the trash business, but that is something that we'd have to have a series of discussions about. How does that really impact the city? I'll tell you right off top, I am not a privatization guy.
Of course you're not.
So I like to think that we can do a better job. Let's look at the challenges and let's come up with some good resolutions.
All right, so you're all about status quo. Keep it in like it is. We're all going to talk about it, and we're all.
No.
It's not your fault. It's not his fault. It's nobody's fault.
No, I think we're into problem solving.
Okay.
It's not necessarily about the status quo.
Talking about this for a year.
Okay.
You've raised our taxes. You should have bought 16 trucks by now. When are they going to be showing up?
My understanding is we have 16 new trucks and
That's
15
good.
should be here by the end of the year.
Well, okay. I don't think we should be in the trash business. I think your time should be, it's more important on other issues in this city. Crime would be a big one. Focus on that. I just can't imagine that this is as important. You guys asking about the wheels, the cranes. I don't understand it. That's my point. We shouldn't be in the trash business.
Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate you coming down and spending this time with us. The next person is Don Botany? I'm botching your name, I'm sure. I'm sorry.
Pretty close. Don Zavodny.
Okay.
And if I can get this down there. So I am the administrator for Local 410 here in St. Louis. And I want to clarify some things that Mr. Frank said that I think need to be clarified here this morning. So Local 410 was certified by the State Board of Mediation as the exclusive representative for, well, we've got 3 units here within the city: the refuse department, water department, and airport, certain airport employees. Back in about, I think, 1995, 1997, Local 410 merged or affiliated with what we call, at that time, AFSCME Council 72, which was on an internal, understanding our internal structure, a conglomeration of locals, AFSCME locals here in Missouri that come together and pool their resources to provide certain services back to our members out in the communities where they live. Council 72 was technically never certified with the Board of Mediation, but it's an internal process in which 410, as becoming a part of the council, services from the council were rendered on behalf of 410 and dues were collected and remitted to Council 72 on their behalf. Last year, at some point, Council 72 did merge into with Council 61. And I guess that begins now some of the problems that we're having with Mr. Frank. To me, that was an internal process. Who the local is affiliated with and who they select to provide certain services for them is probably no different than if a local hires an attorney and assigns an attorney to negotiate a contract or to represent employees. But this came to a bit of a head here recently when we received well, first of all, Mr. Frank said something about he received a document from somebody, he was referring to me, who isn't from here. And he's correct. I'm not from St. Louis. I spend a lot of time here. I actually live in Lincoln, Nebraska. But as I said, my title here is Administrator for Local 410, which gives me the authority to act on behalf of 410 and assign those duties to one of these councils that I described. Mr. Frank's office received a letter in January of 2014 informing him of that. So why he says he doesn't know who I am or what my responsibilities are, I'm not, clear on that. He should go back and look at that letter. But let's talk about contracts versus MOUs, because he said currently we don't have a contract. So he's correct. In a contract is a document that is negotiated by the parties and then put forth to the membership of the union for ratification and to the board, in this case the Board of Aldermen, for approval also before signed by the two parties and agreed to. Traditionally here in St. Louis, that means a contract is basically over wages and benefits and things of that sort, the sorts of things that once there appears to be an agreement or something goes through what's traditionally called a pay ordinance here. He's right, he signed contracts with I don't remember how many other unions that he said he did. Our membership would not ratify, would not agree to the terms and conditions, specifically the wages that Mr. Frank was authorized to offer us in the at the negotiating table. So we were at impasse. What does that mean under Missouri law? It means that the employer has the right to impose, which you did through the ordinance. And so technically we don't have a contract. But then let's talk about an MOU. An MOU is another document that traditionally here in St. Louis has been negotiated between the union and the department or division that it covers, such as the refuse division. We have an agreement like that. He's right. It did technically expire in December. However, we're still living with it. They're honoring it. We're honoring it. I did ask for an opportunity to open and renegotiate it. Never received a response to that, but maybe perhaps at some time we'll get there. But I think that needs to be clear that and he even said it has an evergreen clause, which means if you don't get it negotiated, it rolls over for another period of time or another year. So I hope that kind of clarifies this. We're very disappointed that he did not contact me or contact us before cutting off dues. I mean, if he had some questions about the certification and that process, he should have contacted us and at least collected the dues from the people's paychecks, held it, and make a determination of where it should go. Specifically, he could have contacted us and said, well, until this matter is clarified with the Board of Mediation, I'll remit the dues to Local 410 directly instead of to the council on our behalf. But he chose not to do that. We received a letter on a Wednesday while we were at the beginning of our international convention, and by that same Friday, paychecks that were issued, there were no dues deducted from them. So we're trying to work that out. As of this morning, and as a matter of fact, as we're sitting here, he would have gotten a couple of emails from the Board of Mediation notifying him that I have filed the proper petitions to amend the certification so that they will clearly show that Council 61 is part of the certification for these workers. The other interesting thing that I didn't point out is, or maybe I did, but want to make sure you understand that Council 72 was never certified. The city collected dues for 410, remitted those to Council 72 since about 1997, somewhere in there. There was never a question. And when the merger took place, the city was notified to begin remitting those dues to Council 61, and for over a year they did that without question. And now all of a sudden a question arises and we're cut off, and no opportunity to try to address it with him before that took place. So.
Okay, let me ask you this. So how do you resolve the issue that's going on right now?
Well,
because this is outside.
I know, and I wasn't intending to come forward with this
We're
or
curious as to
even
how do you
address it.
resolve that?
Well, the document that he's referring to is I did file a request for a hearing before the Civil Service Commission, because I do believe this is somewhat of a violation of the civil service regulations regarding union labor relations and checkoff of dues. Maybe we can get together and if his holdup is these petitions or these certifications, that should be a fairly quick process. He's supposed to respond to the Board of Mediation by August 10th if he has any questions or a response to the filings that I've made, and it should be a rather quick, a process that I think should take place, and maybe that'll resolve it. But
okay.
I would hate to see us end up in court over the matter. So,
yeah. Well, I'm going to punt this to the mayor's office. So. I wish you well in resolving this. I'm sure it's something that can definitely be resolved.
Okay, and we're trying to get a meeting with the mayor, but have had some difficulties getting something scheduled, so.
Okay. Well, there are people here that work for the mayor. Maybe they can help you out before you leave today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and have Jamie Wilson come back up so we can kind of wrap up this meeting. I haven't really had a lot of comments and questions. I have a whole litany of them, but I'm not going to keep us here that much longer. We've been here 2 hours and 40 minutes right now. I'll just go through some of them real quick, Jamie. How are we doing on recycling as a whole, as a city? Are we doing pretty good? I understand, with the tariffs and China not wanting to take as much trash, debris or whatever, contamination, I guess I can call it, within the recyclable material, that we're not getting as much. But overall, have we increased the amount of recycling over the years?
Historically, I don't have that number at my fingertips. Proportionally to the amount of total waste in the city, I would say we're doing pretty good for a city of our size. And you already referenced what I was going to say next, as far as I think with increased education on how to recycle would greatly overcome some of the issues with having our recyclables taken somewhere else when they're contaminated, when they're not clean enough to be taken. That creates a problem. So I think that a brunt of that could go with better education on how to recycle. So there's not the wrong materials in there or dirty materials. You hate to go through that effort to recycle to ultimately have it not taken by who's taking it. So I think with increased education we can get over that.
And do we have an educational department within trash, dealing with educating people in schools or the public?
I think would Operation Brightside have some? They would be the education component of the ability to provide that to the public. Internal refuse we don't, but Operation Brightside would.
Okay, and we're looking at 2029. Is that correct? We'll have a stable fleet of trucks, is that correct?
I think by that time, by 2028, we'll have 75 vehicles purchased, which would be that basically redo our whole fleet. But again, then to stay on top of a program so we don't end up in a situation where we're having antiquated equipment. So I think by the end of it, we're going from an average age of 10 years down to about 6 years old for any of our vehicles' average age.
Okay. Now, understanding that we got 16 new trucks in, out of curiosity, how many old trucks did we lose since last year?
I can look that up. I don't know how many equipment services surplus that no longer have a life expectancy on them.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is sometimes it's misleading. We have this many trucks. Oh, we got 16 new trucks, so we think we have, let's say we started with 50, we got 66 trucks.
Right.
But no, we really only have 53 trucks. You know, so I'm curious to know that.
Yeah.
Do we have a current map of all the routes for trash pickup in the city of St. Louis? So if you had the whole city of St. Louis map, is there little blue lines or whatever that you can see where all the routes
Yeah, it's got a lot of colors on it. Yeah, for sure. There's a couple variations of that map out there, but we can get you something so you can get a graphical representation of the routes.
Okay, yes. And so we talked a little bit about routes. And I think what I heard you say where you're gonna, take a look at, analyzing the current routes. Maybe it's where we're supposed to be. Maybe we need to do something different, so on and so forth. When was the last time we actually did that?
You guys know offhand? It's been a while. I mean, routes have been, when you see demand increase or decrease in certain areas, little tweaks have been done, but on a grand scale, it's been a considerable amount of time.
Since I was in high school? Maybe.
Possibly. I don't know.
Okay. It's a joke. Okay. You have any idea how much trash is collected north, south, and central?
Not off the top of my head, no.
All right, get that. Now, you're an engineer, right?
Correct.
And Nick is an engineer, right?
Correct.
Okay. And your math is probably better than mine.
I don't know about that at this point.
I'm thinking that if you have a route that has, a lot of density over a route that has a lot of travel. So this guy is going 2.5 miles on his route, and this guy is going, 0.75 miles on his route. How's that equity? I mean, isn't there something wrong with those routes? And then are we looking at the trucks? Because I would think the guy that's going 2 miles on his route is probably going through a lot of debris and a lot of tree limbs slapping the truck around and all that stuff.
Time incurred with that travel.
Truck. So his truck is probably going to break down a lot faster than if he got a new truck. Am I making a little sense?
You are, yeah. There's a degree of difficulty on some of those routes, both by length and by obstacles. So that all has to be taken into account. It's not a simple take a look at volume only, or take a look at distance only, or take a look. I mean, there's logistics that come into play, and it's a very comprehensive, complex look at this. It's not something we could bang out this week and say, oh, we just redid all the routes. No, that'd be a considerable amount of effort, and it's likely one that you would consult out to have a fresh look at someone that's expertise is specifically at route optimization for refuse collection. Because like you bring up 3 cases or 3 variables that could come into play. There's probably 25 that come into play. So they all have to be weighted, identified, weighted accordingly, and then come up with the best solution.
How much you think that will cost?
I actually wouldn't have no idea. I mean,
okay, that's a question. That's another, get back to.
It's definitely something we'll price out and see what it would take to do something like that from outside sources.
Talk a little bit about bulk pickup. How are we doing with bulk pickup? In some cases, people would say bulk pickup doesn't exist, but do we still currently have a once a month bulk pickup, first Monday, whatever, this week?
Yeah, the city is broken up into its various monthly collections. The difficulty comes in, and those are performed. The difficulty comes when folks will misunderstand or miss their date and still put out their stuff. And then what likely happens on a day-to-day basis, you'll find someone will file a CSB saying there's something in the alley or missed collection or whatever it is, and then we come pick it up because it's a CSB complaint or request. And in one way you are clearing the alley, and in another way you are feeding the animal that basically dumped it there on the wrong day. Could be completely by mistake, they just missed their day, whatever, or it could be someone that just knows that if I put it out and put a CSB, someone will pick it up. I wasn't ready that day, but I'm going to put it out, and I know if I do a CSB, they're going to clean it up. So it is a struggle to keep to your normal schedule of monthly pickups through all those different areas of the city, knowing that you still have to address some of those little fires as far as people putting their stuff out on the wrong days or just dumping it in someone else's alley, and someone legitimately, I may have a mattress behind my house because someone decided to dump it, or a TV or something, and I don't want it behind my house. It's not my stuff, so I will file a CSB rightfully that I've got junk in my alley, and someone will have to come pick that up.
Are you finding that people are on a regular basis actually using the system the way it's designed and prescribed as far as putting it out that first week of the month and so on and so
I
forth?
do.
Are you
I
seeing a
believe that.
decline in that and people just use CSB?
No, I see the majority of people are doing the best they can. There's just, unfortunately, those that don't, while in the minority, kind of make it look bad for everybody.
Okay, and as far as like limbs in the alley, all this overgrowth of vegetation, it makes it difficult sometimes for the truck to get down without being slapped around literally by these branches or, huge in some cases. Even my own alley, if you drive down my alley, I mean, I feel sorry for the trash truck. How do we how do we resolve that? So that we don't create additional wear and tear, because some things could get stuck in the arm, and then there you go, it's a mechanical problem.
Yeah, there's limbs hanging over, there's low wires, there's a lot of obstacles as far as the collection. And sometimes it's just driving your normal truck down the alley. I only imagine what it's like taking the refuse truck down the alley in some of these cases where you do have overgrowth. But back to your question, that is on us, on our foreman, on our drivers to identify those. It's one thing to just accept it the way it is, but it's another to identify that, and let's let our forestry department come in and knock out an alley and get the overgrowth out of their way so we can have those collections and not risk our equipment or our drivers while they're performing their duties within those obstacles. So we do need to identify that, take the onus on ourselves to identify those so someone can fix it.
Do you guys actually have, I listened to what was said about this card, and I've heard that before. I think last year we heard that the driver writing on this card about maybe there needs for a dumpster because it's had a hole in it or whatever. How do you guys actually track that? Do you have a computerized system where, like CSB, it has a service request number? How do you guys track that when the driver tells you there's a problem?
Well, if it's driver generated, internally generated, traditionally, if someone has it on their card that there's a hole in the dumpster, they just report to their foreman and that'd be resolved internally. I guess they could put that in the system to clear that out themselves, so it's in the system. More than likely, day to day, that would just be their foreman would hear about it, and then we would just resolve that internally. There is problem codes for those that is one of the exact problem codes. There's a hole in the dumpster from the citizen side, so it can be coded from the outside from them, and within our drivers themselves, they can identify it.
But because it's not really in a system, sometimes it can slip through the cracks.
And we do perform our own internally surveys of our dumpsters, the condition of them. We don't just wait for the driver to see it. We do have our own internal forces that go out and, they're in the process right now of surveying dumpsters. And we just went through maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago, a process of putting a whole bunch of dumpsters out where we had already identified bad dumpsters, whether it's the sides are dented in, there's holes in it, whatever. So we've already gone through that, and we are surveying again. So not just waiting for the drivers, but being proactive.
Yeah, my testimony is that the system is not working as well as it should, because I've talked to drivers. I've witnessed a trash can for 2 months. It never got replaced. I caught the driver. I asked him. He showed me, hey, look, here it is. I told the foreman, and it just didn't happen until I called Randy. That stuff needs to stop. We have to have a better system in place where we can do follow-ups, where we can feel like my colleague from the third said, our voices are being heard. That's extremely, not only a citizen's voice, but of course the alderman voice is being heard. And I don't like doing a lot of automatic requests because it interrupts the system that we have. The more automatic requests, the more CSB requests get pushed behind. So I try to work the system, but there's a great need for the system to be fixed. Trucks that damage, probably I'll come back to that. Okay. So my colleague from the second talked about being turned away at the dump, at the city dump site. If you have an ID, her dad, so on and so forth. Jamie, that seems to be an easy fix. If it's the neighbor.
I thought there was a miscommunication. She shows her ID or her water bill. She should be able to dump in that circumstance. I don't know why they would be turned away. I missed.
Randy
I heard what she
validated
was saying.
that.
I thought Randy answered, but
No, he validated. Now, Randy, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't you say they will get turned away? If it's the same, if they recognize that truck.
They've got her. They've taken record of who's, by her identification, her water bill, who she is, and if she's dumped that year. I think the only way.
What does the water bill have to do?
Way she could be turned away, just proof of paying.
But
paying your city bill.
you don't have to take your water bill when you go to dump.
Just proof
take
of
your
who
driver's
she
license.
is, or driver's, I mean, you can describe it, but they would have her on record as if she's dumped already. I
Right.
think the only way she'd be turned away is if she had already dumped that month.
Go ahead, Randy, clear it up, because I misunderstood earlier. I heard you say you'd be turned away. Because she said she has been turned away and her neighbor's been turned away, so maybe you can clarify this.
The only way she would be turned away, I think what I said was if they already had record that that person dumped for that month.
The truck. But she was saying the truck had come, and I've gone there personally myself, and that's what the guy said. If this truck has been here, that's pretty much, your dump. Which, it made sense to me then, but then if I did take my neighbor, because I have a truck, I mean, my neighbor should be able to get a dump. I mean, so if you guys are saying that's how it should be working, then we can tell our constituents that
I
go
think
back or
that's
something.
something that we should definitely look at, because if you're paying for city service and you don't have a way to get it to the dump, I think you still should be able to.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that would sound like a simple fix. We can actually fix that. Got that. Okay, here's one of the things that I want to take away. And I appreciate, Jamie, you saying, being an engineer, you're a problem solver. Being a military guy, I'm a problem solver. That's what I'm used to doing. What I would like to do is create a real trash task force and sit down and analyze and recognize and appreciate the challenges that we have, and then come up with some reasonable solutions. I think that we need to do a report to our community. This trash situation have really gotten out of control, especially since we're paying for trash service. So I think we owe it to our constituents to do a report that says, hey, here's what we know the problem is, here's where we're on now, and here's where we're going. In order to fix that, and in order for everybody to be heard, I was wondering if you think it might be a good idea if, myself, maybe another member of the committee, the personnel director, the driver, more specifically Eric Wisner, forestry, the police, and maybe a couple of members of the community at large could all get together and wrap our heads around, and Dottie with Citizen Service Bureau, and really think about, how we can best address this problem, that every voice is heard, and then we make meaningful, impactful change that we can actually evaluate on a quarterly basis, so that next year, when we have these hearings, we could say we've made progress.
I think that'd be a benefit from what you described, as well as being able to communicate, again, earlier what I had said, in agreement that we should be communicating more of what we are coming up with, and the things from a logistics side of it that are obstacles to us, and what we've identified as solutions, to be able to communicate that with this group, and to get input from again, I've said consistently that I'm always open to outside opinions, outside meaning internal to the city, and outside, I mean literally anybody, to have the ability to take their input, to communicate what we're thinking, reality check what we're thinking, and then identify shortcomings, if any, within that varied group of different disciplines.
Yeah, I just don't think this is all on the shoulders of the street department of refuge. I mean, there's a lot of people who participate, again, like the personnel director, make sure we have adequate staff, Citizen Service Bureau, how do we make sure we communicate back to the community about it really was solved, or it will be solved within a reasonable amount of time, forestry, because if it's construction material, we can't expect bulk pickup employees to be picking up a whole bunch of construction material. So forestry has an important role as a team, because we're all a team. We're all the city of St. Louis.
Correct.
And we all want to offer the best quality service that we can. And then the police, how do we communicate with our constituents from a law enforcement standpoint of reporting people who are illegally dumping, and how do we promote the fact that we've arrested 30 people this year because they've illegally dumped and confiscated their trucks or whatever it is, so that people can really feel good about their trash service.
I think that's a good idea, and maybe even, and I don't know the frequency of which, to report such advancements, maybe quarterly through the Streets Committee is a good milestone to come together and say this is what the group is, maybe a report is as part of your regular subcommittee meetings, maybe quarterly, year, something, a way to report, or every month, I don't know, whatever makes sense.
So I'll follow up with you and see if we can put our heads together and come up with some strategies of better communicating to the community on what we're doing, and make the city of St. Louis a cleaner city.
Sounds good to me.
All righty, so we have been here for almost 3 hours now. I will consider the Streets, Refuse, and Traffic Committee adjourned.